Notice it wasn't Trump. You know, every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, you know, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email. every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell a list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com. And you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you. Free Speech TV is in the thick of it right now with their pledge drive, their membership drive, and also, they're rolling out 2 new programs this month. I mean, lots of cool stuff is coming from Free Speech TV. The network is expanding. The network is growing. A lot of you have been, and I really appreciate this, a lot of you have been telling your friends about Free Speech TV, and the result has been that our base of listeners is growing. We're seeing it substantially in our call volume, and we're seeing it in in other areas, and that's a really good thing. In fact, that's one of the most powerful ways you can contribute to Free Speech TV, in addition to sending money, which is, of course, really important and needed right now because that's how the network stays alive. But that is telling other people about it, telling them about this show, and you can find it right here and all that kind of stuff. So thank you for that, and keep it up. In the meantime, we've got to raise, a couple $100,000 here over the next week or so, and your help is really, really needed. So with a $20 gift, there's the bumper sticker, our slogan for the show, fair and only slightly unbalanced. With a $72 gift, you get the book, The Hidden History of Guns, my new book. In fact, it's out this week. Tomorrow is the official publication date. And with the $120 gift, you get an autographed copy of my book, The Hidden History of Guns. With a $20 monthly gift, a pledge of $20 a month, in other words, becoming a supporting or sustaining member. And this is important because this helps Free Speech TV budget. This, if they can look at a spreadsheet and say, okay, we've got this many people who are pledging $10 a month, 20, 30, 50, whatever it may be, over this period of time, then we know where our budget points are going to be at each point. And in fact, if we can get enough people doing this, we can dial back these fundraising drives rather substantially. So that's a $20 a month gift. You get the stainless steel water bottle with the Thom Hartmann Program logo on it. With $30 a month, you get the Thom Hartmann Program tote bag and the stainless steel water bottle that says "Democracy Begins with You." With a $500 gift, there is a virtual meet and greet. We're going to do an invitation-only meet and greet, get together, where you'll see me on your computer screen, and you'll be able to talk to me and ask me questions and things like that. I don't think that I'll see you, but I'll hear you, and we'll have a conversation. That's with a $500 gift. Not just you, but it'll be a whole bunch of us getting together at the same time, but only people who have made these $500 gifts. Also with a $500 gift, if you are in the Washington, D.C. area or want to come there, next Monday, June 10th, yeah, that would be next Monday, I will be in Washington, D.C. at Busboys and Poets at, as I recall, was it 6:30? I don't have my one sheet, but I'm pretty sure it's 6:30. So the hour before that, which would be 5:30, we're going to have an invitation-only private little meet and greet there in Washington, D.C. So, please check it out, and that's with a $500 gift. That's something that you can do. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Portland, Oregon, rather, and hang out with us in the studio here and get to see the magic of television in this digital age where it's pretty amazing. Nate is sitting over there with the entire video suite. It's being run by one guy, and it's stuff that 10 years ago would have taken 6 people and a multi-million-dollar set of equipment, and the technology has advanced so rapidly, as has Nate's skill set, that one guy can just run the whole video of this show. Sean is over here running all the audio and booking our guests and keeping me going and wide awake and whatnot. Depending on the day of the week, either Joyce or Nick will be here. They answer our phones and fill in on the boards. Typically, Joyce is in the first half of the week and Nick in the second half. Sometimes Louise drops by, but I'll certainly be here, and we'll be here, the last hour of the program, and then we'll walk to a restaurant nearby and have some lunch. So, I have a lot of fun with these, and I think that the people who come really enjoy them. A number of people have come more than once, which is kind of cool. So those are the what would you call them, gift levels or premium levels? I think premium is the word generally used in the nonprofit world. But the real bottom line is, if you want genuine progressive programming, real progressive programming, not some progressive programming owned by Comcast, or faux progressive programming, frankly, this is where you find it, right here on Free Speech TV. And to the best of my knowledge, pretty much not anywhere else. All these different programs, progressive perspective, that you can get on TV. So call now, 877-378-8669. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. And wow, what a day. Donald Trump is besmirching the reputation of the United States and the United Kingdom. I don't think he's done anything like totally obscene yet, other than insulting the mayor of London and calling him short. I think that was the most recent tweet. Honest to God, Sadiq Khan is the mayor. He has a message for the world about Donald Trump, which I will share with you in a few minutes. And somebody on Twitter said that Trump brought 1,000 members of his family, or 1,000 people with him. The security for this thing is going to be like $40 million. They're booking them in a hotel that's $27,000 a night for the luxury suite, and all his family members. He's staying at the ambassador's residence, or at least that's what I've read. And that 1,000 person entourage number, I have not been able to confirm. In fact, I asked the person on Twitter, "Do you have a link for that?" Because that seems like a little too much. But in any case, Trump is over there embarrassing the country. And meanwhile, here back in the United States, Egberto Willies is asking I think a really important question over at Daily Kos. He says, how do we avert the inevitable plutocrat-driven civil war? Now, I'm not envisioning a shooting kind of civil war, but I would argue that, and maybe we need to come up with another word for it that doesn't imply people going out with guns. But there is a walling off of different parts of America based largely on race, on lifestyle, and by lifestyle I'm not talking about gender identity or anything like that. I'm talking about living rural versus living urban, working in tech versus being a farmer, those kinds of things. So you got race, you've got lifestyle / geography, and what's called politics. And I think that this was really highlighted by the fact that Donald Trump, when he gets to the UK, freaks out and tweets an attack on AT&T, which now owns CNN. And you have to wonder, did he tell his friends, "Hey, sell your AT&T stock. I'm gonna tank it for you," or sell it short, make some money on it. You make money when the stock goes down. Although I don't know if it went down. But the entire market, went down, and then it's up, and then it's down again. I don't know what's going on with the market today, but anyhow, Trump comes into London and immediately tweets out about how upset he is that he can't watch Fox. Fox hasn't broadcast in the United Kingdom for a couple of years because nobody was watching. So why have the expense? I mean, you know, former Australian Prime Minister Kevin Rudd pointed out in a recent newspaper piece that Rupert Murdoch took over so much of the media in Australia that he basically destroyed the politics of that country. Then he moved to the UK and he bought, you know, the Times of London and a whole bunch of tabloids, and he did the same thing to the UK, you know, helping get, you know, right-wing prime ministers elected forever. And then he came to the United States and he did it to us through Fox, the New York Post, and the Wall Street Journal. And, I mean, Fox really stands alone against every other news service in denying climate change, in supporting tax policies that support the billionaires to the exclusion of average people, in supporting deregulation of the poisons that are poured into our air and the poisons that are poured into our water. Fox News supports all these things. And no other media does, because no other media is, you know, billionaire-owned, billionaire-controlled, and programmed specifically in ways that only help very, very wealthy right-wing billionaires and their companies, and the companies that made them rich. And I think that his unwillingness to even watch CNN should tell us everything we need to know about the tragedy of democracy that's being caused by having a 24/7 propaganda channel. So how do we prevent this from tearing our country apart? I mean, it's already happening. You got a gaslighting billionaire in the White House, as Egberto Willies points out over Daily Kos. A guy who just delights in lying through his teeth to the American people. Over 10,000 lies since he became president. And, you know, and thousands of lies, obviously, before that, thousands of lies going back to his claiming that Barack Obama, you know, our nation's first black president, couldn't be a legitimate American citizen. His calling in the 90s for the death penalty for the Central Park Five, who had nothing to do with the violent attack on that young woman in the park. It turns out it was, you know, a serial rapist slash killer, who, as I recall, was even a white guy. But Donald Trump, you know, bought this ad in the New York Times saying, "Put him to death," right? And he hasn't retracted it. Egberto Willies, and so, you know, my question for you, and our number is 202-808-9925. Do you think that we are heading towards something that resembles a civil war, a tearing apart of families, a tearing apart of the fabric of our country? You know, with or without guns, I think you might be able to argue that actually there's even a gun piece to this that's kind of scary. For the better part of 2 decades, this is David Neward over at Daily Kos. For the better part of 2 decades, Americans have generally ignored their quietly mounting problem of homegrown domestic terrorism committed by far-right white extremists. And he points out that both the numbers and the history demonstrate that officially and in the media, we have underinvested in monitoring and confronting this kind of terrorism. These are the so-called red pill young men. For example, out of Monroe, Washington, and the Snohomish County court system, 20-year-old Dakota Reed, he's a young man, was posting under the nom de plume Rudolf Haas, which is he was the commandant of Auschwitz. And he says, he posts on Facebook, "I'm shooting for 30 Jews. No pun needed, long way away, not long ways away anyways. See you goys." So they arrested him, freed him on $50,000 bond, and he goes back out and he says, "You all mind if I go into a random courthouse in the movie Narnia and take my M32 grenade launcher? Coming for my guns, the police is. Booby-trapped with explosives, my front door has been." Trying to talk like Yoda. This time the judge set bail of $500,000. You know, in Utah, 27-year-old Christopher Cleary says, you know, basically, I'm still a virgin, and therefore I'm going to, quote, "kill as many girls as I see." He worked out a plea bargain. He said he was, quote, "involuntarily celibate." In other words, no woman would have sex with him. And so he's going to go out and kill them. I mean, this is insane. And it's growing, and it's growing on social media. And I'm very concerned that this is literally tearing us apart. Heidi Beirich is the director of the Intelligence Project over at the Southern Poverty Law Center. And she says, quote, "There's no way that if someone was connected to Islamic extremism, they would be handled this way. We have two totally separate terrorist, basically legal ways to deal with terrorism in the United States. If they are Muslim terrorists, all American, or if they're foreign terrorists, then we have really strong laws. And I would add to that, if they are black guys that have been labeled terrorists by our government, I mean, going all the way back to I think it was in Philadelphia where they firebombed that house, the Project Move. What was the name of that? In any case, yeah, it's like this is nuts. And so we've got a way for dealing with white supremacist terrorists, which is very different from the way that we deal with Muslim supremacist terrorists. And, as Heidi Beirich of the Southern Poverty Law Center points out, the latter is much more punishing. That is the anti-Muslim terrorists, filled with legal tools that don't exist for domestic terrorism. And she says some of the sentences for domestic terrorists are ridiculously light in comparison to the others. So that's another piece of this. Meanwhile, the thoughts of the Brits. This is the mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, in The Guardian on yesterday, as I recall, maybe the day before yesterday. He says, praising the very fine people on both sides when torch-wielding white supremacists and anti-Semites marched through the streets clashing with anti-racist campaigners. Threatening to veto a ban on the use of rape as a weapon of war. Setting an immigration policy that forcefully separates young children from their parents at the border. The deliberate use of xenophobia, racism, and otherness as an electoral tactic. Introducing a travel ban to a number of predominantly Muslim countries. Lying deliberately and repeatedly to the public. No, writes the mayor of London, these are not the actions of European dictators in the 30s, nor military juntas of the 70s. I'm not talking about Vladimir Putin or Kim Jong-un. These are the actions of the leader of our closest ally, the President of the United States. This is a man who tried to exploit Londoners' fears following a horrific terrorist attack on our city, amplified the tweets of a British far-right racist group, denounced as fake news robust science evidence warning of the dangers of climate change, and is now trying to interfere shamelessly in the Conservative Party leadership race by backing Boris Johnson because he believes it would enable him to gain an ally on number 10 for his divisive agenda. And then he points out, by the way, this is not just something happening in the United States. He says Donald Trump is just one of the most egregious examples of a growing global threat, the far right. It's on the rise around the world, threatening our hard-won rights and freedoms and the values that have defined our liberal democratic societies for more than 70 years. He points out Orban in Hungary, Salvini in Italy, Le Pen in France, Farage in the UK. These are basically fascist movements. So to Egberto Willie's question, how do we avert the inevitable plutocrat-driven civil war? And how do we more effectively call out Fox News and the other organizations, the other so-called news organizations and whatnot, who are basically promoting civil war in the United States? How do we reach out? How can we reach out to these involuntarily celibate young men? How can we create a country where people don't feel like this shooter in Virginia Beach that, work is hell and I've got to go in and shoot the place up? How do we fix this stuff?
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's 18 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with your calls and thoughts and more of mine right after this. And welcome back. Let's see here. Susan in Phoenix, Arizona. Hey, Susan, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hi. Yeah, I was hearing your discussion on Fox News. I'm very surprised about CNN being now owned by AT&T, which I find is still a right-wing network. So is MSNBC, owned by Comcast. a right-wing, I shouldn't say network, a right-wing owner. So now we've got Fox News, which is propaganda, and we're trying to overcome this with free speech. There is no such thing as liberal media, as I see it, and I think you've said that too.
Well, I think there is. You're listening to it right now, Susan, but that's pretty much the end of it. I mean, you've got our show, and then there's on Free Speech TV, and then there's I suppose the Young Turks and their network, and I don't know of anything else that's out there.
Well, the other thing is when you say you're liberal media, the difference between you and like Fox News, of course, has their own agenda, which isn't just right-wing media, it's propaganda, because they tell them what to say. It's all structured in a message.
I would say the difference. I mean, I have an agenda too, Susan. I want to see I want to see our country return to the values that we embraced in the presidency of Franklin Roosevelt. In summary, that's what I want to do. But the Fox News agenda is we're going to do what helps the billionaires. I mean, denying science, denying climate change, for example. Cranking up the abortion wars. Giving incels who want to kill women a pass. I mean, all this stuff is just. This is beyond having a take or having a position. This is, as you say, Susan, propaganda.
Yeah, but the thing is like you got Sean Hannity and these guys that are just pumping it up, and we don't have that. To me, what we need to overcome these lies is to pump up the truth a little more.
Right.
Figuring out a way that we can do that. I don't know how we do that. I know Rob Reiner was on Stephanie Miller's show saying that he's putting out some TV shows, which is an awesome idea. If we can get more of this, because we have a lot of the celebrities on our side, we just don't have the networks on our side. So to overcome this, somehow we got to yell a little louder. I don't know what else.
I sent a note to Norman Lear last week suggesting that he should consider, or if he knows anybody who would consider doing a remake of the Beverly Hillbillies. Only it takes place in the White House, and Jed is Donald, and Ellie Mae is Ivanka, and what was the dumb son's name? He's Don Jr. Jethro, that's right.
Oh, really? That would fit.
I think it would be hysterical, right? Let's bring back the Beverly Hillbillies and use the original theme song and everything, right? The whole bit, And that, or maybe Green Acres.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
But anyhow, I'm with you, Susan. I think that the American people, the real tragedy is that there is a right-wing media ecosystem that people can live in their entire lives and never leave. And all they have to do is just watch Fox on television and listen to right-wing hate on the radio, and they are never exposed to what's actually going on in the country. Susan, thank you for the call. And we'll be back. It's 22 minutes and change past the hour. Stick around. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. By the way, Ambassador William Vanden Heuvel is going to be with us a little later on. And in our second hour, Victoria Jones is going to drop by. She of British ancestry. She's an American citizen now and a reporter her whole life. And we're going to be talking about Theresa May and Donald Trump and the EU and the Euro election, the European elections, the EU elections. Trump's baby blimp. We'll get into that in some depth. And also, I've got an article that's going to be going up at some point today. No, it's not mine. An article that's going to go up at some point today that is about guns. And in fact, my new book, The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment, should be shipping today or tomorrow from bookstores and whatnot. And I want to get into that. I'm going to get into that in some more detail in the second hour of our program. And I will be in New York on Friday, right? No, Thursday. Friday night.
No, Thursday.
No, wait a
for the
minute.
Bookstore, Friday for the
Hang on, I've got it right here. Yeah, Thursday night, I'm in New York City at the Strand. There we go. This Thursday at 7:30 p.m. at the Strand, and then the following Monday, I'll be in Washington D.C. at Busboys and Poets on K Street. That's at 6:30 in D.C. It's at 7:30 in New York City. So, anyhow, Rick in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. Hey, Rick, what's on your mind?
Yes, I'm responding to your comment about what we're turning into. And I've been telling all my friends, you know what, we are turning into a third world country.
Yeah.
The proof of it is I know a lot of people, they can't get the help. There's an article in my local paper about a mushroom farmer gets over 100 people. He can't even get 10 because they're all afraid they're going to be deported. My doctor feels we are already in the crevices of a third world country because people can't pay her bill. And what about these kids that have no love, no parents? If you don't think they're going to take, violent action against us, I think you're living in La La Land. We could end up having shootings in the street. I hope I'm wrong, but that's the way it looks like to me.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a real problem, Rick. And when you can, and the question, I guess, is when did America become a third world country? When Reagan was sworn into office in 1981, in January of 1981, the United States was the largest importer of raw materials. In other words, we bought iron ore from other countries, right? We imported raw materials. We were the largest raw material importer in the world. And what we did, and Rick, thank you for the call. I'm just going to go off on this now because you gave me a great topic here. And then we manufactured those raw materials into finished goods. We took that iron ore, we turned it into iron, we then turned the iron into steel, we then turned the steel into washing machines and dryers and cars and appliances and ships and cars and train cars and all the, we made stuff. And then we exported a lot of that stuff that we made. We were the largest importer of raw materials, the largest exporter of finished goods. And similarly, we were the largest creditor in the world. More countries owed the United States money than any other country in the history of the world and that any other time in history. That was when Reagan was sworn into office. He became president of a fully developed first world country. By the time his vice president, George Herbert Walker Bush, left office, 12 years of Reaganism policies, of neoliberal policies, which are continuing to this day, 12 years of this stuff, the United States went from being the largest importer of raw materials to being the largest exporter of raw materials. We now ship to China iron ore and trees, which they turn into products that they ship back to us. We've moved from being the largest exporter of finished goods to the largest importer of finished goods. Everything you buy in America is made in China. And we became the largest debtor in the world. That is a third world nation.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And it's why we need a national industrial policy, and frankly, a national industrial policy and a national trade policy, I think, would help with the coming civil war, as it were. Free Speech TV is in the thick of it right now with their pledge drive, their membership drive, and also, they're rolling out 2 new programs this month. I mean, lots of cool stuff is coming from Free Speech TV. The network is expanding. The network is growing. A lot of you have been, and I really appreciate this, a lot of you have been telling your friends about Free Speech TV, and, the result has been that our base of listeners is growing. We're seeing it substantially in our call volume, and we're seeing it in in other areas, and that's a really good thing. In fact, that's one of the most powerful ways you can contribute to Free Speech TV. In addition to sending money, which is of course really important and needed right now because that's how the network stays alive, but that is telling other people about it. Telling them about this show, and you can find it right here and all that kind of stuff. So thank you for that, and keep it up. In the meantime, we've got to raise, a couple $100,000 here over the next week or so, and your help is really, really needed. So with a $20 gift, there's the bumper sticker, our slogan for the show, fair and only slightly unbalanced. With a $72 gift, you get the book, The Hidden History of Guns, my new book. In fact, it's out this week. Tomorrow is the official publication date. And with the $120 gift, you get an autographed copy of my book, The Hidden History of Guns. With a $20 monthly gift, a pledge of $20 a month, in other words, becoming a supporting or sustaining member, and this is important because this helps Free Speech TV budget. This, if they can look at a spreadsheet and say, okay, we've got this many people who are pledging $10 a month, 20, 30, 50, whatever it may be, over this period of time, then we know where our budget points are going to be at each point. And in fact, if we can get enough people doing this, we can dial back these fundraising drives rather substantially. So that's a $20 a month gift. You get the stainless steel water bottle with the Thom Hartmann program logo on it. With $30 a month, you get the Thom Hartmann Program tote bag and the stainless steel water bottle that says "Democracy begins with you." With a $500 gift, there is a virtual meet and greet. We're going to do an invitation-only meet and greet, get together, where you'll see me on your computer screen, and you'll be able to talk to me and ask me questions and things like that. I don't think that I'll see you, but I'll hear you, and we'll have a conversation. That's with a $500 gift. Not just you, but it'll be a whole bunch of us getting together at the same time, but only people who have made these $500 gifts. Also with a $500 gift, if you are in the Washington, D.C. area or want to come there, next Monday, June 10th, yeah, that would be next Monday, I will be in Washington, D.C. at Busboys and Poets at, as I recall, was it 6:30? I don't have my one sheet, but I'm pretty sure it's 6:30. So the hour before that, which would be 5:30, we're going to have an invitation-only private little meet and greet there in Washington, D.C. So, please check it out, and that's with a $500 gift. That's something that you can do. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Portland, Oregon, rather, and hang out with us in the studio here and get to see the magic of television in this digital age where it's pretty amazing. Nate is sitting over there with the entire video suite. It's being run by one guy, and it's stuff that 10 years ago would have taken 6 people and a multi-million-dollar set of equipment, and the technology has advanced so rapidly, as has Nate's skill set, that one guy can just run the whole video of this show. Sean is over here running all the audio and booking our guests and keeping me going and wide awake and whatnot. Depending on the day of the week, either Joyce or Nick will be here. They answer our phones and fill in on the boards. Typically, Joyce is in the first half of the week and Nick in the second half. Sometimes Louise drops by, but I'll certainly be here, and we'll be here, the last hour of the program, and then we'll walk to a restaurant nearby and have some lunch. So, I have a lot of fun with these, and I think that the people who come really enjoy them. A number of people have come more than once, which is kind of cool. So those are the what would you call them, gift levels or premium levels? I think premium is the word generally used in the nonprofit world. But the real bottom line is, if you want genuine progressive programming, real progressive programming, not some progressive programming owned by Comcast, or faux progressive programming, frankly. This is where you find it, right here on Free Speech TV. And to the best of my knowledge, pretty much not anywhere else. All these different programs, progressive perspective, that you can get on TV. So call now, 877-378-8669. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
may be coming to your city soon on our book tour for The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment. I'll be in New York, Washington, D.C., Portland, Los Angeles, Seattle, San Francisco, Chicago, and Minneapolis. Here I come. More information is available at thomhartmann.com. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Yep, Thursday night, I am at the Strand in New York City at 7:30 p.m. It's on Broadway, and I'll be on Broadway. Monday of next week, I'll be in Washington, D.C. at Busboys and Poets. I'll be doing my show next week, Monday and Tuesday, from the studios of We Act Radio in Washington, D.C., our affiliate there. And Wednesday, I will be back here in Portland, and I will be at the Strand, downtown Portland. Say that again? Powell's. Or Powell's, excuse me. The Strand is New York. Yeah, it's been a long weekend. Boris Johnson, by the way. Donald Trump has come out and said, oh, yeah, Boris Johnson, he's a good guy. Boris Johnson is kind of a weird, eccentric, right-wing crank politician in the UK. And Trump said before the visit, you know, he's trying to get Boris Johnson elected because he thinks Boris Johnson likes him because they're both right-wing cranks. And so he tweeted, I think Boris would do a very good job. I think he would be excellent. I like him. I've always liked him. Actually, he didn't tweet that. He said that to a reporter. So what they're doing right now is, or last night, they projected onto Big Ben a picture of Boris Johnson along with a quote from Boris Johnson from 2016. Quote, Donald Trump is unfit to hold the office of President of the United States. Ah! Oh, God. Okay, Len in Woodmere, New York. Hey, Len, what's on your mind today?
Hi, you were asking what it's going to take to prevent the Civil War, I think.
Yeah, and I'm, you know, just to be clear, I'm not talking about Americans killing each other, except that Americans are killing each other right now, and it's happening with increasing frequency.
You know, I think it's going to have a lot to do with the distilled, conversation that the ultimate Democratic challenger comes up with. I mean, the message, in my mind, is that all of these divisions that we're talking about, urban versus rural, white versus non-white, rich and poor, you know, doesn't touch the element of the intergenerational challenges that we have. And, you know, imagining the guy in West Virginia, giving him a good job building a school that can be, and then another guy building a medical school that can be the place where his neighbor or his kids go to free and becomes a doctor so that everybody in the community can get health care. And, recognizing that, the schools are also going to be teaching these doctors and other people how to take care of them when they're too old to be able to take care of themselves. And the whole intergenerational, project that we have in order to rebuild our country. Because when you talk about infrastructure, we're talking about infrastructure that people from 0 to 90 use.
Yeah. If you look at the states where hate, racial divides, gender inequality, and income inequality is the greatest, they tend to be the old Confederacy states, and they tend to be Republican-controlled. They're the poorest. They have the worst health care. They have the least access to health care. They have the lowest wages. They seem to think that that's something to brag about. And then you look at the states where, and those are the states where Republican policies win. And in the states where Democratic policies win, what you find is, good jobs, well-paying jobs, strong unions in many cases, and, people of different races working together, people of different gender identities, getting along. So I think you're right, Len, and I think that if the Democratic Party, if we can finally get a presidential candidate, the last one that we had who really did this was Lyndon Johnson.
One other thing, because I'm sure you have a lot of people, I keep going back to people and saying that Ronald Reagan had many good qualities of leadership, but he was perhaps the most harmful president in our history with his 9-word retort that the most frightening words are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
Yeah.
He basically disengaged people from the reality that they are the government.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that was the billionaire's idea. Thank you, Len, for the call. And that was the whole idea. I mean, Lewis Powell laid this out in the Powell memo. This is This is how you divide and conquer a country, and that's exactly what Republicans have done since 1980. The question is, are they going to hang on to it, number one? And I think, Len is absolutely right that putting America back together economically is going to then put us back together culturally. And that means we have to repudiate the neoliberalism that has been the economic policy of this country since 1981. Bill in Sebastian, Florida. Hey, Bill, what's up?
Yeah, good afternoon, Tom. I was going to expand maybe a little bit on that Powell doctrine and what the Koch brothers did there in Virginia with that George Mason University, training all these journalists and educators to promote this this new agenda, to do away with unionization, do away with any type of job security, and basically attack FDR.
Right.
And it's just a shame that people are not expecting security in their older age, and that's wearing on people, Tom.
Yeah, I think you're right, Bill, and thank you for the call. This is something that we need to be, taking frankly very seriously, and frankly doing something about. Bill, thanks for the call. Meredith in Falls Church, Virginia. Hey, Meredith, what's on your mind today?
Hi, I wanted to know what your thoughts are on the rise of white nationalism and its relationship to the decline of manufacturing, as well as the deaths of despair, which are overdoses, alcoholism, and suicide.
I grew up in Michigan. I grew up in Lansing. I lived in Detroit. I was born in Grand Rapids. I lived in Michigan until I was 27 years old. And one of the things that I saw, when I grew up in Michigan in the 1950s and the 1960s, the reality was that there were a lot of good jobs, and there was, this was still a time where we were trying to make the transition into a more integrated society, but it seems like the whole alt-right thing. I was there, but it wasn't a big thing. I never heard in high school, in junior high school, in elementary school, never heard people promoting the kind of white supremacy that is being openly and nakedly promoted now in our schools, by other kids, because they're getting it off social media and things like this. And I think what happens is that when people have a reasonable life, and that reasonable life starts to slip away, and it's been slipping away as a consequence of Reagan's neoliberal policies, they look around and they say, okay, what happened to my good job? What happened to my union wages? What happened to my ability to buy a home? What happened to my ability to go to college for free? Or cheap, where I can work at a gas station in the summer and pay for an entire year of school at Michigan State University. What happened to all that? And then the right-wingers come along, who were the ones who stripped people of these things and say, oh, well, it's those black people. This was the message, that they started promoting Reagan. Reagan's first election was all about the welfare queen, this black woman that he said was making over $100,000. They never found her. She didn't exist. But, this was the beginning of that scam. And then that morphed into Donald Trump's, it's the brown people who are coming for your jobs. It's the people from south of the border. And that then turns it into, racializes it, and then Trump hyper-politicizes it. So I think that, this, and Meredith, you're the second person to bring this up, I think that this is a really important theme, that until we bring back decent jobs in America, and that it involves a change in both our trade policies and our domestic labor policies, and it's not going to come out of the Republican Party. The Republican Party is gung-ho, with the single exception of Donald Trump, gung-ho for free trade, and with Donald Trump totally in favor of destroying unions. It's going to come from the Democratic Party. I think the Democratic Party, having a coherent anti-neoliberal message like AMLO in Mexico last week, Nicholas, who lives down in Mexico part of the year, called into the program and said, I think it was the environment minister of Mexico, a cabinet minister, came out and said, no more neoliberalism here in Mexico. That's it. We're done with this kind of crap. And when that happens from the Democratic Party of the United States and we return to the Great Society of LBJ and the New Deal of Franklin Roosevelt, when the Democratic Party returns to its roots and has enough power to actually put those policies into place, then I think we're going to see a change in America. Meredith, thank you for the call. And thanks for watching us on YouTube. Thomas in Rancho Palos Verdes, California, listening on KPFK. Hey, Thomas, what's up?
Hey, I know we're talking a lot about economics as it relates to the deep-seated division in the country, but I would argue that actually the economics, while they're really important, and I think it's key to repudiate neoliberalism, as you said, I think even below that is a downstream of a culture where people are no longer volunteering. They don't feel connected to their communities, their local governments. And perhaps that does have, something to do with, as you said, stripping people of this idea that they are the government themselves.
Right.
And so, perhaps even just this idea that America has kind of just become another shopping mall where there is no unifying, culture. I think Trump tried to, shoehorn something in as this idea of we're all Americans, we all bleed red, that kind of thing. But it just there was never an authentic follow through there. There was never an authentic policy to kind of bring that together. And I think you're right. I think, whether it's an economic change towards building infrastructure or something has to come through to unify us. And I think it does start with repudiating neoliberalism and ending foreign wars and so many other things, but it's going to have to change from the culture first.
What I know from all the years I've been on this earth is that when the economy is going well, and the economy is not going well right now, we have record low unemployment, but what kind of jobs are out there? $10, $12 an hour? I mean, these are not real jobs. Thomas, thank you. When the economy is going well, people tend to, raise families and live their lives. When the economy is not going well, people start getting seriously upset.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And I'm not talking about the larger economy. I'm talking about the economy as it affects, the bottom 90% of Americans. And that economy has sucked since 1981. And welcome back. Merrick in West Hills, California, listening to KPFK. Hey, Merrick, what's on your mind today?
Yes, you've talked about so many things today, Tom, and I really appreciate your show. Listen, we need a paradigm shift in this country. We have people in Europe, this young girl from Sweden who said, for Preacher Friday, she said, we are not going to let you continue with the government unless you could deal with climate change. She's 16 years old. She's created millions of children who are taking time out of school to stop the governments who are not doing anything about it. And they said, well, you're going to take over the government if you don't do anything about it. We need a paradigm shift in this country. We need women in government who really know what's at stake for the future of our world. And it may not just be the Democratic Party. We need maybe some party, a third party, that's going to really address the issues. And right now,
here's the problem, Eric. If you try to roll out a third party, it's never, outside of the collapse of the Whigs, it's really never been done. I mean, you roll out a third party, whether it was John Anderson or whether it's the Green Party or whether it was the Libertarian Party, and all you do is you take votes away from the party that's most closely aligned to you. I think that what we need to do is take over the Democratic Party.
Yes, that's true. And we need to do it by, first of all, we cannot have people like John Bolton in our government. He is a detriment to the world. If he tries to start another world war, this is ridiculous that he is even in government now. How does that even happen?
Right. Yeah. And Elliott Abrams. I mean, Elliott Abrams was convicted of essentially war crimes back in the 90s. And Bill Barr told George Bush, the senior, to pardon him. I mean, this is nuts. Yeah, I'm with you, Merrick. Thank you very much for the call. Kevin in San Pedro, California, also listening on KPFK. Hey, Kevin, what's up?
Hey, what I'd really love to see is a debate between the talking heads. I would love to see Hannity and Limbaugh and the guy from InfoWars go up against the people from MSNBC, Amy Goodman, and have a fact-based debate where it is fact.
That's the problem, Kevin. I used to have. It's been probably 4 or 5 years, but I used to have on a fairly regular basis, a couple times a year, Alex Jones on my show, and we would debate stuff. And this was before he went totally, right-wing, white supremacist, weird stuff, or at least openly. He was just another right-wing crank. But the problem with debating these guys, I used to do the same thing with Mark Morano, the guy who runs Climate whatever it is, the right-wing climate denial site, and I'd have him on and I'd debate him. And the problem, and I quit doing it because they would just throw out lies. They would not stick to what was actual, verifiable, independent, we can all point to it and say, yep, that's true, truth. And it's...
This is why I wanted fact-based or fact-checked lie.
Yeah, but that's the problem. I mean, these guys come with their own facts. They cite their own scientists, in quotes, people who don't have anything to do with climate change, for example, but, have a PhD after their names, and they say, well, this guy says, that there's no such, problem, et cetera. So, but I get what you're saying. I would love to see more dialogue and a return to some kind of civility in that dialogue. I'm just not hearing it. I mean, we had a caller to this program at the very end of the show last week who tried to tell me how wonderful Trump is and the Republicans. And I asked him, fact-based, in the last 50 years, a single piece of legislation from the Republican Party that helps the American middle class. He couldn't name one. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Jared in Downington, Pennsylvania. Hey, Jared, what's on your mind today?
Well, Tom, I hear a lot of problems in America and the world in general, but I don't hear any of the callers talk about the main issue that is plaguing the world, and that main issue is capitalism. Regardless of the development and growth of capitalism, and maybe it was useful to get us out of feudalism and absolute monarchy in the past. We need to realize that that was just a phase in the development of human society, and that we need to move beyond capitalism into a socialist society based not off profit and turning people into commodities and having class conflict, but one where everybody is equal and there is no more poverty and suffering. But I don't hear anybody talking about that.
Yeah. I think there's a middle ground here, Jared, and that is you don't throw out capitalism, you regulate it to the point where it works. I mean, it's like saying, let's not play poker anymore because Joe has a mirror in the ceiling and he's the only one who knows about it. Or Joe marked the cards and he's got infrared glasses so he can read the marks and no one else can. And so therefore the poker game isn't fun anymore because one guy keeps winning. I mean, it doesn't mean that you blow away poker. You go back to playing with rules that make the game fair. Capitalism is essentially just a game. It's a way that people can interact with each other, around business and money and things like that. And I think that if we don't make that distinction, if we don't say that we are in favor of going back to Franklin Roosevelt-style regulated capitalism, rather than saying, we want to throw out capitalism. You start talking about throwing out capitalism, people start remembering the Soviet Union and looking at China and going, really? Is that what you want?
Well, Tom, you say regulate capitalism, but I would argue that has never worked. Even in times when it, quote unquote, did work, like it worked for a couple people. It worked for a majoritarian of the society.
Jared, I remember the Soviet Union really, really well. I was in Moscow when it was still the Soviet Union. Louise and I stayed at the Aeroflot Hotel in Moscow, which was listed as a 5-star hotel. It was owned by the government, as most, I think all hotels were at the time. And we were on the 3rd floor. The elevator the elevator was half dead. It didn't go to the 3rd floor. So when we brought our bags in, we had to go up to the 4th floor and walk down the stairs. And when we left, we walked down the stairs to the 2nd floor, and then, with our bags. The restaurant in this 5-star hotel in Moscow at the time, this was the Soviet time. The restaurant was a big empty room with a bunch of plastic chairs and tables, a microwave oven, and a freezer full of frozen pizzas. That was the restaurant. You could wait. In East Berlin, when it was East Berlin, when it was East Germany, we lived on the East German border on the west side. And I went to East Berlin with my oldest daughter, and we spent the day there. We waited for an hour and a half for a cab. We waited 2 hours to be served in a restaurant. When you say no capitalism, you're throwing out the possibility of creating even microeconomic systems that work. And, I think that if you look at Cuba right now, and Louise and I were in Cuba in March of last year, and they're introducing micro-capitalism, right? Small stands, and you can't have, a restaurant can't serve more than 50 people, and you can't have more than one business that you own, and a business has to be owned by no more than 2 families. It just, they're figuring out ways to make capitalism work in their society. And I don't think we want to go. We don't want to retry the Soviet experiment. It was a disaster.
I disagree with a couple of the statements you made, namely with the Eastern Bloc, which was revisionist at that time and was not following socialist Marxist principles. They were extremely.
Well, you could argue neither was the Soviet Union and neither was China. But what country has, the only place I've ever seen true Marxist principles put into place where they actually work is in communes, in kibbutzes in Israel and communes in the United States. And I visited a bunch of the farm in Summertown, Tennessee, for example. But even the farm now, people, it's no longer communal ownership. It's now individual ownership of homes. They went to a micro-capitalism model because the socialism model wasn't working for them. Can you tell me a country that we should point to and say, there's our example, they don't have socialism? I mean, they don't have capitalism.
Currently?
Yeah, or any point in history.
I can't point to one per se, but that doesn't justify capitalism. I mean, slavery was an economic system that was prevalent throughout the 17th and 18th century.
Slavery, the first documented case of slavery was 7,000 years ago. Slavery has existed in systems that had nothing to do with capitalism. I think you could argue that slavery has existed in communist systems as well.
But that doesn't...
It just goes by other names.
I would disagree with that because...
Just give me an example of what you're talking about that works in a country where it works. I mean, regulated capitalism seems to be working well in Sweden, in Iceland, in Denmark. Why not here?
But those still have class conflict in those societies.
Oh, of course they do. Jared, I'm sorry, we're out of time. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
We say fight back!
You know, every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, you know, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell the list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, you know, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com and you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you. Free Speech TV is in the thick of it right now with their pledge drive, their membership drive, and also, you know, they're rolling out 2 new programs this month. I mean, lots of cool stuff is coming from Free Speech TV. The network is expanding. The network is growing. A lot of you have been, and I really appreciate this, a lot of you have been telling your friends about Free Speech TV, and, you know, the result has been that our base of listeners is growing. We're seeing it substantially in our call volume, and we're seeing it in you know, in other areas, and that's a really good thing. In fact, that's one of the most powerful ways you can contribute to Free Speech TV, in addition to sending money, which is, of course, really important and needed right now because that's how the network stays alive. But that is telling other people about it, telling them about this show, and you can find it right here and all that kind of stuff. So thank you for that, and keep it up. In the meantime, we've got to raise, you know, a couple $100,000 here over the next week or so, and your help is really, really needed. So with a $20 gift, there's the bumper sticker, our slogan for the show, fair and only slightly unbalanced. With a $72 gift, you get the book, The Hidden History of Guns, my new book. In fact, it's out this week. Tomorrow is the official publication date. And with the $120 gift, you get an autographed copy of my book, The Hidden History of Guns. With a $20 monthly gift, a pledge of $20 a month, in other words, becoming a supporting or sustaining member, and this is important because this helps Free Speech TV budget. This, you know, if they can look at a spreadsheet and say, okay, we've got this many people who are pledging $10 a month, 20, 30, 50, whatever it may be, over this period of time, then we know where our budget points are going to be at each point. And in fact, if we can get enough people doing this, you know, we can dial back these fundraising drives rather substantially. So that's a $20 a month gift. You get the stainless steel water bottle with the Thom Hartmann program logo on it. With $30 a month, you get the Thom Hartmann Program tote bag and the stainless steel water bottle that says "Democracy begins with you." With a $500 gift, there is a virtual meet and greet. We're going to do an invitation-only meet and greet, get together, where you know, you'll see me on your computer screen, and you'll be able to talk to me and ask me questions and things like that. I don't think that I'll see you, but I'll hear you, and you know, we'll have a conversation. That's with a $500 gift. Not just you, but it'll be a whole bunch of us getting together at the same time, but only people who have made these $500 gifts. Also with a $500 gift, if you are in the Washington, D.C. area or want to come there, next Monday, June 10th, yeah, that would be next Monday, I will be in Washington, D.C. at Busboys and Poets at, as I recall, was it 6:30? I don't have my one sheet, but I'm pretty sure it's 6:30. So the hour before that, which would be 5:30, we're going to have an invitation-only private little meet and greet there in Washington, D.C. So, you know, please check it out, and that's with a $500 gift. That's something that you can do. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Washington, or come to Portland, Oregon, rather, and hang out with us in the studio here and get to see the magic of television in this digital age where it's pretty amazing. Nate is sitting over there with the entire video suite. It's being run by one guy, and it's stuff that 10 years ago would have taken 6 people and a multi-million-dollar set of equipment, and the technology has advanced so rapidly, as has Nate's skill set, that one guy can just run the whole video of this show. Sean is over here running all the audio and booking our guests and keeping me going and wide awake and whatnot. Depending on the day of the week, either Joyce or Nick will be here. They answer our phones and fill in on the boards. Typically, Joyce is in the first half of the week and Nick in the second half. Sometimes Louise drops by, but I'll certainly be here, and we'll be here, the last hour of the program, and then we'll walk to a restaurant nearby and have some lunch. So, I have a lot of fun with these, and I think that the people who come really enjoy them. A number of people have come more than once, which is kind of cool. So those are the what would you call them, gift levels or premium levels? I think premium is the word generally used in the nonprofit world. But the real bottom line is, if you want genuine progressive programming, real progressive programming, not some progressive programming owned by Comcast, or faux progressive programming, frankly, this is where you find it, right here on Free Speech TV. And to the best of my knowledge, pretty much not anywhere else. All these different programs, progressive perspective, that you can get on TV. So call now, 877-378-8669. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Intent for the Trump-Moscow property. It's the Mueller report.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. We've been talking about the rise of hard-right propaganda and the possibility, Egberto Willies talking over at Daily Kos about the inevitable autocrat-driven civil war. I'm not talking about people shooting at each other, but basically tearing our country apart. And, it's being fueled and fanned by right-wing billionaires and the media that they own, in the case of Fox News and Rupert Murdoch, and it's pretty scary stuff. I want to move on to, and we'll continue that conversation, but I want to also move on to the Donald Trump's visit to the United Kingdom. And, what Sadiq Khan had to say, and Boris Johnson saying, he's not fit to be president. Of course, that was 3 years ago. And, let's just dig into this a little bit. Theresa May's pending departure, who's going to be prime minister, what's going on with the EU elections, with our resident expert on all things European, Victoria Jones. She's the executive director of the DC Radio Company, LLC. And her Twitter handle is Victoria Jones DC. And Victoria, welcome back.
I'm not wearing a hat.
Oh, my. What does that mean?
I know. Well, I just feel underdressed today, considering how magnificent the hats are.
Oh, I see.
And yes.
Okay. So you should be wearing a hat because we're talking. Okay, I get it. I'm curious. First of all, Donald Trump, Buckingham Palace invited Barack Obama to sleep in the palace. They apparently have something like 30, 40, 50 guest rooms. But they told Donald Trump that they're undergoing a substantial renovation. What's going on here?
Well, it depends. I'm sure there are renovations going on. The question is, how extensive are the renovations? And nobody is really saying this. Nobody is saying, well, they're so extensive that he can't stay there. Nobody's saying they're so minimal that it's a way of not allowing him to stay there. So everybody is being very circumspect and saying there are renovations, and so he has to stay at Winfield House. So everybody is being incredibly polite about this. But there is an undercurrent there about it. In the same way that heads of state are usually welcomed by the Queen at Horse Guards parade. Occasionally they're welcomed on the lawn of the palace, but it's a more downbeat welcome, to be welcomed sort of in the back garden, in the backyard.
Interesting. So are these insults to Trump, or are these?
No.
Is there any meaning to this?
Sometimes there are subtle meanings. He is getting a state banquet tonight, and it is all the trappings, the place settings between the knives, forks, spoons, side plates, and the chairs are measured by a ruler. The Queen will inspect everything. So he is getting absolutely everything the way it should be done. But some things are now, it could have been security that he was welcomed in the palace rather than Horse Guards parade. It is notable that Barack Obama went to his welcome by the Queen in a motorcade where he was cheered. President Trump went by helicopter, and he will go from the American ambassador's residence to the palace again tonight by helicopter. It's a terribly short distance, but they are worried about protests.
Wow. Is the Trump baby blimp flying?
I don't know if it's flying yet, but it is expected to fly tomorrow. Yeah. That's the day that he's having meetings with Prime Minister Theresa May. And tomorrow, Tuesday, is the more political day. Today is the pomp and circumstance day.
If Brexit happens, if a hard Brexit happens, the UK is going to have a real challenge in terms of international trade, and I would think, could really use the United States as a bilateral trade partner. Do you think that is part of why Donald Trump was allowed to invite himself to this? My understanding is that he's the one who asked them to invite him over. And if that's the case, and correct me if I'm wrong on that, do you think that might have something to do with it?
Yes, I do, absolutely. But the U.S. ambassador to the U.K. has caused great alarm and consternation among many, including many conservative members of Parliament, by a television interview that he gave in the last 24 hours, in which he was talking about possible trade deals with America, and that everything would be on the table, including chlorinated chicken in from the United States, which is something that is just horrendous. And he was saying, well, they could choose not to buy it. And then and he was asked, well, what about the National Health Service? Was that? And he was saying, yes, even the National Health Service. And that's, at that point, conservative members of Parliament started to go ballistic. Because
wait a minute, because we eat food here in the United States that would be illegal in the UK because it's not healthy or it's dangerous, like chlorinated chicken, which sounds weird, but it's probably, wow. So
yes, but the National Health Service, the idea that the United States might insist on bringing in private firms, and that a conservative prime minister such as Boris Johnson might be open to the idea of a further privatized National Health Service with American firms involved, was horrifying to many in Britain.
So do you think that, Trump, it seems that from his point of view, Donald Trump thinks that showing up in the UK and promoting the candidacy of Boris Johnson is going to help Boris Johnson become the next prime minister. Might it work the exact opposite way?
It could work the opposite way. the thing is that many conservative MPs are looking at who is most likely in a possible general election, which could happen anytime soon, really, to defeat Jeremy Corbyn. And Jeremy Corbyn most fears running against Boris Johnson, Jeremy Corbyn being the leader of the Labour Party. He fears Boris Johnson because Boris Johnson is a very good campaigner. He is considered somebody who's not bothered whether he says things that are accurate or not.
Boris
Johnson. He's very charismatic, Boris Johnson.
So
yes,
he's kind of the UK's version of Trump.
In some ways, but he also, he went to, I think it was Oxford. He's very bright. He's clever and clever.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think Trump is clever. I don't think he's particularly bright, but it's so. Okay. So we've talked about that and how you think that's probably going to shake out. How the European Parliament elections just happened a week or so ago. And while everybody was all agog about the rise of the right-wing parties, I think the really big news was that the left-wing parties really had a much more significant victory, broadly speaking, than the right-wing parties, with the exception of the delegations from some of the more right-wing countries. Where does all this go?
I think it's interesting, very interesting, because the mainstream parties didn't do well, but parties on sort of either end of the spectrum did well. I mean, I think it speaks to a real disaffection with mainstream politics. I don't know where I think it shows the opening of the system. And I think that's something that mainstream politicians need to look out for, and that they're not looking out for because they just can't believe that the system that has worked so well for so long could possibly really be under threat, even though they see it all the time. I want to mention one other thing that is going to come up in talks with Theresa May, and that is national security, and that is Britain's. It's not a done deal yet, but Huawei, and Britain is going to bring Huawei in to do 5G. And Theresa May cast the deciding vote in her cabinet, and many in her cabinet wildly resist the idea because they think China's going to spy on them, which I think is. And Trump is saying, well, we will probably or may not share intelligence with you anymore if you bring Huawei in, which is a huge development as Britain is part of the Five Eyes nations which share intelligence. This is a major, major development.
Well, and then the flip side of that is that Donald Trump has allowed, by executive order, allowed the highly political Attorney General, Bill Barr, the guy who engineered the cover-up of the Iran-Contra scandal back in 1992 when he was Attorney General. He has allowed him to go to our intelligence agencies and pull out any information he wants and make it public or distribute it in other ways. And, there's considerable concern that the Five Eyes countries who basically openly share intelligence with the United States. And you're going to have to refresh my memory as who those countries are. I know it's the UK, Australia, but I don't recall who the other three are.
Canada and New Zealand.
Canada and New Zealand, thank you. This is kind of the these are all the English-speaking countries, that the Five Eyes countries are pretty freaked out that a political agent is going to be able to burrow into what literally would be, who are the spies, where are they, what are they saying? I mean, there's been a lot of publicity here about the repercussions of that. How about in the UK? How about in Europe?
There's a lot of concern about that overseas. And I gather overseas in the intelligence agencies, and also I gather in the intelligence agencies here that sources and methods that active agents could be put at risk by this, and that that agents or sources out in the field are just going to clam up and not say anything.
Yeah, I think there's a growing consensus, at least from the people that I know who are close to people in the intelligence community, that what's going on here is Trump is trying to get the U.S. spy inside the Kremlin, the one who delivered the information to the Mueller investigation that led to the indictment of those guys at the Internet Troll Agency, the Internet Research Agency. He's trying to get that spy killed. That he wants to find out who it is and out him to the Russians so that they can take care of this little problem that they have, because this guy knows what's going on. But who knows? Who knows? Victoria Jones, Executive Director of the DC Radio Company, LLC. You can tweet her at Victoria Jones DC. Victoria, thanks so much for dropping by today.
Thank you.
It is always so informative speaking with you. I very much appreciate it. We'll be back. We're going to talk about guns. We're going to talk about capitalism. We're going to talk about the fate and future of the world, as it were, and the United States, and Civil War. Seriously? Stick around.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be right back with more of the news of the day and your calls, too, right after this. And welcome back. Bill in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Hey, Bill, thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. What's up? Bill? I don't hear Bill. Let's try Marion in Los Angeles. Hey, Marion, what's up?
Oh, thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
My heart's pounding. I'm going to try to be clearer spoken here, but forgive me if I'm not. Okay. Love you, love KPFK, love free speech, hate Trump. I would think twice about calling Trump a dog, because I wouldn't want to offend dogs. My personal feeling.
Okay.
If Norman Lear takes you up on your suggestion to revamp Beverly Hillbillies and cast Trump as Jed Clampett, if that were to happen at all, a more appropriate cast would be as, what's his name? Mr. Drysdale.
Oh, as the banker?
If you do that, let me first identify myself as a proud, it hasn't been documented, but our family believes it to be true, a proud hillbilly descendant of those who fought in the original Revolutionary War. Just a little about who I am.
Yeah.
Now, I respect that you have free speech, but I hope that you will rethink that and make it public, because what have hillbillies done to deserve that?
Oh, that's a good point, Marianne. That's there's a lot of good hillbillies out there.
To cast Trump as an ignorant hillbilly. If anything,
can you think of another show, Marianne, that Trump should be cast into?
I mean, maybe Drysdale, but the hillbillies who don't like Trump.
Yeah.
Well, some of them would be, and I'm one.
Yeah, no, I get it, and I'm sorry I offended you. The point I think, and actually the point of the Beverly Hillbillies was that Jed and his mother were cast as or was she his wife or his mother? Granny. Granny was his mom. Yeah. Were cast as favorable characters, as people that we like, as people that we care about. And, so putting Trump in that role probably doesn't make sense. Marianne, thank you. I'll retract my suggestion. Suzanne in Sacramento, California. Hey, Suzanne, what's up?
Oh, hi. I'm the one that's always calling about women of color. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to update you on the politics that are affecting us. Okay. We did well in the 2018 election. For the first time, there were more women of color than ever. Mm-hmm. However, underneath, the mainstream Democrats are really rebelling against those women have come in. I have been this year, as for the last 10 years, contacting all the people running for president on the Democratic side. Still, there's not a single one who will include the phrase racism plus sexism in their platforms. They will say, oh, yes, we're for women, and yes, we're for people of color, and we mean you all, but they don't want us specifically mentioned. And some of them are very nasty. I just went to a meeting for one of the candidates recently, and I said to them, you're talking all of these progressive things. Where are the people of color? They're not here. And when I mentioned women of color, a couple of people got very angry.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
They're not letting us have a voice, even though they went to She the People and all of that.
Right.
So
Suzanne, this is going to be an evolutionary process, tragically. I mean, this should have happened 100 years ago or more. Thank you, Susan, for the call. Every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell the list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com. And you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Okay, I want to add something to our conversation. Boy, this is an amazing piece. This is from The Independent. The $24,000 a night hotel where the Trump family is staying. Donald and Melania are apparently staying at the U.S. ambassador's residence, which is pretty fancy in and of itself. Nigel Peacock, who works on our show and lives in the U.K., sent me a note this morning saying that it has the second largest garden in London behind Buckingham Palace. So, it's a big deal. But the rest of his family... apparently his entourage is close to 1,000 people, and they are staying in the Corinthia Hotel, where the royal penthouse costs $24,000 a night. We are spending millions on the Trump crime family going to the UK. So there's that, and that's a thing. But and what's up with the Brits? But I wanted to get into guns. I wanted to share a perspective on this that I think is pretty important. People are asking why the shooter in Virginia Beach used a gun to settle his workplace score. The answer is probably pretty simple. When a man holds a gun, he literally holds the power of life and death in his hand, and that's incredibly seductive. With a gun in his hand, a man can look around a room, a building, a public area, and specifically identify who will instantly die and whom he will allow to live. It's a power that traditionally is held by doctors, priests, cops, and soldiers. The power of over life and death is greater and more intoxicating than any other power. It's one of the reasons why some men are specifically drawn to those professions and historically have tried to regulate them to be male only. If you're not male and have never carried a gun in public, it's only an imaginary experiment, but science shows that literally just handling a gun alters men's levels of testosterone and measurably increases their aggressive behavior after they have handled the gun. This is largely a male problem because men commit 85% of all homicides and 97% of all homicides where men don't know each other. In the case of alcohol and school and workplace shootings, the numbers are also 97% male. And we know that American guns now are the second leading cause of childhood death in the United States. We honor our soldiers and our cops. Well, I'm gonna continue this rant right after the break, and then we'll pick up your phone calls. It's coming up on 27 minutes past the hour. What do we do about guns in America, too? Stick around. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, helping you win the water cooler wars in the place where despair is not an option. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Fair and only slightly unbalanced. Thom Hartmann here with you. We'll be right back. Free Speech TV is in the thick of it right now with their pledge drive, their membership drive, and also, you know, they're rolling out 2 new programs this month. I mean, lots of cool stuff is coming from Free Speech TV. The network is expanding. The network is growing. A lot of you have been, and I really appreciate this, a lot of you have been telling your friends about Free Speech TV, and you know, the result has been that our base of listeners is growing. We're seeing it substantially in our call volume, and we're seeing it in you know, in other areas, and that's a really good thing. In fact, that's one of the most powerful ways you can contribute to Free Speech TV, in addition to sending money, which is of course really important and needed right now because that's how the network stays alive. But that is telling other people about it, telling them about this show, and you can find it right here and all that kind of stuff. So thank you for that, and keep it up. In the meantime, we've got to raise, you know, a couple $100,000 here over the next week or so, and your help is really, really needed. So with a $20 gift, there's the bumper sticker, our slogan for the show, fair and only slightly unbalanced. With a $72 gift, you get the book, The Hidden History of Guns, my new book. In fact, it's out this week. Tomorrow is the official publication date. And with the $120 gift, you get an autographed copy of my book, The Hidden History of Guns. With a $20 monthly gift, a pledge of $20 a month, in other words, becoming a supporting or sustaining member, and this is important because this helps Free Speech TV budget. This, you know, if they can look at a spreadsheet and say, okay, we've got this many people who are pledging $10 a month, 20, 30, 50, whatever it may be, over this period of time, then we know where our budget points are going to be at each point. And in fact, if we can get enough people doing this, you know, we can dial back these fundraising drives rather substantially. So that's a $20 a month gift. You get the stainless steel water bottle with the Thom Hartmann program logo on it. With $30 a month, you get the Thom Hartmann Program tote bag and the stainless steel water bottle that says "Democracy begins with you." With a $500 gift, there is a virtual meet and greet. We're going to do an invitation-only meet and greet, get together, where you know, you'll see me on your computer screen, and you'll be able to talk to me and ask me questions and things like that. I don't think that I'll see you, but I'll hear you, and you know, we'll have a conversation. That's with a $500 gift. Not just you, but it'll be a whole bunch of us getting together at the same time, but only people who have made these $500 gifts. Also with a $500 gift, if you are in the Washington, D.C. area or want to come there, next Monday, June 10th, yeah, that would be next Monday, I will be in Washington, D.C. at Busboys and Poets at, as I recall, was it 6:30? I don't have my one sheet, but I'm pretty sure it's 6:30. So the hour before that, which would be 5:30, we're going to have an invitation-only private little meet and greet there in Washington, D.C. So, you know, please check it out, and that's with a $500 gift. That's something that you can do. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Washington, or come to Portland, Oregon, rather, and hang out with us in the studio here and get to see the magic of television in this digital age where you know, it's pretty amazing. Nate is sitting over there with the entire video suite. It's being run by one guy, and it's stuff that 10 years ago would have taken, you know, 6 people and a multi-million-dollar set of equipment, and the technology has advanced so rapidly, as has Nate's skill set, that one guy can just run the whole video of this show. Sean is over here running all the audio and booking our guests and keeping me going and wide awake and whatnot. Depending on the day of the week, either Joyce or Nick will be here. They answer our phones and fill in on the boards. Typically, Joyce is in the first half of the week and Nick in the second half. Sometimes Louise drops by, but I'll certainly be here, and we'll be here, you know, the last hour of the program, and then we'll walk to a restaurant nearby and have some lunch. So, you know, I have a lot of fun with these, and I think that the people who come really enjoy them. A number of people have come more than once, which is kind of cool. So those are the what would you call them, gift levels or premium levels? I think premium is the word generally used in the nonprofit world. But the real bottom line is, if you want genuine progressive programming, real progressive programming, not some, you know, progressive programming owned by Comcast, or faux progressive programming, frankly, this is where you find it, right here on Free Speech TV. And to the best of my knowledge, pretty much not anywhere else. You know, all these different programs, progressive perspective, that you can get on TV. So call now, 877-378-8669. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
I may be coming to your city soon on our book tour for The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment. I'll be in New York, Washington, D.C., Portland, Los Angeles, Seattle, San Francisco, Chicago, and Minneapolis. Here I come. More information is available at thomhartmann.com. Welcome back. 34 minutes past the hour. Thom Hartmann here with you. I will be on the book tour here. I'll be in New York City Thursday night at 7:30 at the Strand, and the following Monday, a week from today, in Washington, D.C. at Busboys and Poets. It should be great fun. And, you know, also I'll be here in Portland on Wednesday of next week. Not this Wednesday, but a week from Wednesday. So just FYI. So just to summarize my gun rant here. Number one, we know from scientific research that just handling a gun jacks up men's testosterone levels and increases their aggression after handling the gun. We know that shooting a gun increases levels of endorphins, the opiate-like chemicals in the brain, the pleasure chemicals. Similarly, driving big cars does the same thing to men. Driving big, powerful cars does the same thing. It spikes testosterone levels, increases aggression over short periods of time. Well, we figured out how to deal with that years ago. Right? We say you must have a driver's license, you must have the car registered, you must have liability insurance. We should be applying those things to guns. But instead, we've got a situation here in the United States now where you go to the airport and you're boarding your plane, and they say, before anybody else boards, first we're going to let the soldiers board because we so honor their service, right? Talk show hosts on TV, they reflexively say, thank you to your service, for your service to any veteran. So we honor vets because they put themselves in the line of fire. We honor cops because they put themselves in the line of fire. Every time a police officer is killed, it happened here in Portland a few months ago, it kind of shuts down the city for the police funeral. I mean, it's a big deal. And yet, every person in the American military who was killed last year worldwide, and every person who was killed as an active duty police officer last year all across the country, add up all those deaths, and it's still less than half of the number of children who died at the hands of guns last year in the United States. And yet we don't say at the airport, well, any child under 19 is welcome to board now because we so honor your willingness to die in your schools and homes to maintain the profits of the gun industry and so that men can jack their testosterone by handling guns. Right? It's time for us to do something about this, in my humble opinion. Anyhow, back to our conversations. Jerry Lee in Phoenix, Arizona. Hey, Jerry Lee, what's up?
Hey, I don't. So, what do we want to talk about? Capitalism or the white nationalism?
Your choice.
I've been waiting forever to call about the white nationalism thing.
Go for it.
I noticed I don't watch Trump very much anymore, but when I was, watching his little things with foreign leaders and stuff, he'd sit there with his legs wide open, and then his finger and thumb, index finger and thumb, would make like outs, and then the fingers would be pointing down. And I thought to myself, what does that mean? And then I saw on a white supremacist documentary or something that one hand with the thumb and forefinger encircled, touching tip, and the rest of the fingers down was a white nationalism symbol. Now, has anybody else? I haven't heard anybody else talk about that.
Oh yeah, this is the woman who was sitting behind Kavanaugh during the Kavanaugh hearings. She was one of his assistants, and she kept doing it. It's that you spread the three fingers out so it looks like a W, and then the circle created by your thumb and index finger is the P. It stands for white power, and yeah, that's absolutely what's going on, Geraldine.
I used to, well, anyway, good. I'm glad somebody
Stephen
else
Miller has done this, by the way. There's pictures of Stephen Miller in the White House flashing the white power sign. It's the thing right now. These incels, these involuntary celibate people, you know, and the white nationalists and the white supremacists, they're all gung ho on it. Geraldine, thanks so much for the call. Jim in Littleton, Colorado. Hey, Jim, what's up?
Yeah, I was listening to NPR this last weekend, and a guy wrote a book on this woman that was the welfare queen, and Reagan used her, of course.
Yeah, it was a different one.
She only stole about $19,000, and she went to prison for it.
Right.
She stole $100,000 total doing her other little scams. But the funny thing was that he called her a grifter in his book. So I just wanted to clear that up. She does exist, but she changed her identity, which is why she kind of disappeared.
Right. I read that story, and that woman was not the woman that Reagan was talking about. And if you hook up the timelines, you know, she was a notorious welfare cheat, that particular woman, and she did get busted. But in Reagan's mythology, this woman was getting away with it. She was making $100,000 a month, as I recall. I mean, they're not. But I get your point, Jim, and I did read that book review in the Times. Thanks a lot for the call. Marta in Big Bear Lake, California. Hey, Marta, what's up?
Well, I keep thinking about a few weeks ago when you talked about how our presidential candidates can be like FDR and Lincoln and respond to, like FDR responded to the crisis of the Depression. But I think, you know, it was also the growing Communist Party. And Lincoln responded to the South possibly seceding. I think that's what you discussed. Now, my idea is that Democrats and Republicans are being affected by parallel movements. The Republicans, the Tea Party, and, you know, has sort of taken over in the form of Trump. And on the left, the Green Party was a threat, and the progressives are now a threat to the establishment. So I think the crises are deindustrialization in the form of loss of jobs to our corporate free trade. And the other is the cataclysmic climate disruption and the collapse of our life systems in the oceans and agriculture. And the Green Party rightly, you know, was responding to those. So the solution is the Green New Deal. What do you think?
I absolutely agree, Marta. I would love to see the Green New Deal. I think that it's a great concept. Keep in mind the specifics have not been nailed down, but the broad principles have been, and I think they're marvelous. I totally agree. Marta, thank you for the call. Teresa in Riverside, California. Hey, Teresa, what's up?
Hey, sir, I just want to call and say, I haven't heard anybody talking about this Mueller report. Do we understand that it is the Republican Party, as well as the Republican Senate, that are backing this guy? We have the power in the House, but it's now the time for power in the Senate. We need to take back the Senate. Once the Democrats take back the Senate, he won't have anybody to help him.
Right.
And what did I tell you about that infrastructure? I told you wasn't going to be done about it.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, sir. So until we take back the Senate, that power that we need, we're going to always be negotiating.
Yeah.
Take back the Senate.
Well, and the problem, Teresa, is the Republican billionaires, the right-wing billionaires, and there's a whole network of them now, you know, a few hundred people who are either billionaires or vastly multi-millionaires. And they get together twice a year. The Koch brothers put this thing on. I guess it's now Charles Koch, his brother's not doing so well. And I think the reason why a number of Democratic candidates who logically should have been running for the Senate and instead are running for the president are doing so is not that they think they're going to become president, but that they're afraid to run for the Senate because they know that the Kochs and their network are going to pour hundreds of millions of dollars into the Senate races. They know They have given up on the legislative process. Or not given up. They've succeeded in gridlocking the legislative process, and they have moved on to the judiciary. Their whole thing is we need to control the judiciary, and the way that you do that is by controlling the White House and thus controlling the appointments. Donald Trump has appointed more federal judges so far in 2.5 years than any other president in the history of our nation. And that's because Mitch McConnell, throughout most of Obama's presidency, refused to allow the Senate to even consider federal judges. It was such a crisis that in 2015, John Roberts wrote a letter to the Senate to Mitch McConnell saying, you know, we have a national crisis with a lack of judges. Please let some of these judges through. And Mitch McConnell said, nope, not going to do it. And you know, we've got a serious problem here. And I agree with you. Taking back the Senate is the way to do it. And
also, Mr. Hart, and also, sir, I just want to spin one more point, one more thing I'm upset about. Why are these lawyers allowed to make these statements? I thought the Bar Association has a code of conduct. Our lawyers that are helping Trump out are not abided by.
Right.
Why aren't these men tossed out? Don't you think it's time for them to go?
Well, lawyers can say and do pretty outrageous things, and particularly if they're doing them on behalf of a client. You know, we cut them a lot of slack on the principle that everybody, even horrible criminals, you know, murderers and rapists, are entitled to a defense, to criminal defense. It doesn't mean we have to like them. It doesn't mean their lawyers have to like them. But you know, if they're hired by them and they're willing to serve them, so I don't think that the Bar Association is going to be the agent that's going to help us here, Teresa. But, you know, I get what you're saying, and I think that Bill Barr is the classic example of it. The larger concern is what he's doing, what Barr is doing, and Trump is doing to the Justice Department. I mean, this is truly, you know, awful / breathtaking. What's happening with the Justice Department?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, you know, we'll see where this all goes. Teresa, thank you so much for the call. The impeachment, you know, we're talking about impeaching Donald Trump. I mean, that's always the subject. I would like to hear more conversation about the possible impeachment of Bill Barr. You can impeach an attorney general just as easily as you can impeach a president. And the attorney general is not elected, so you're not going to get the kind of pushback that you get from impeaching a president. But I think that Bill Barr, in misrepresenting the Mueller report and lying about it to the American people and to Congress, has committed high crimes and misdemeanors worthy of impeachment. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And in 4 minutes, we'll be checking in with Bob Ney with Talk Media News to find out what's going on in the world. Stick around and find out. And welcome back. Tom in St. Paul, Minnesota. Hey, Tom, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. 2 points on messaging here. And how the Democrats always miss these opportunities. But, you know, in a couple of days, the 75th anniversary of D-Day is coming up on Thursday. And I'm listening to right-wing radio and these chicken hawks trying to co-opt D-Day. And all they do is talk about Churchill and Eisenhower, never mention Roosevelt, the guy who led the whole thing, you know, to defeat right-wing fascism.
Right.
And that's one thing the Democrats miss, this opportunity to show that we are the patriots. The greatest generation elected Roosevelt 4 times to defeat fascism. And where are the Democrats? The Republican chicken hawks are trying to co-opt this thing, right?
Good point.
And then the other thing, Bernie wrote an op-ed, I think it was today, in the New York Times.
Yeah, I just printed it out. I read the first half of it. I haven't finished it yet.
Okay, it's great. He's basically talking about returning the Democrats to FDR's progressive roots, and he ends it by saying, FDR did it, and we can too.
Right.
That's what we got to do, man.
Yeah.
Just Americanize it.
I think, you know, increasingly this I'm an FDR Democrat thing is starting to pick up some traction. And I hope so. I do too. It needs to go a lot farther. Tom, thanks a lot for the call. Excellent points always, as always. John in Portland. Hey, John, what's up?
Hey, Tom, how you doing? Hope you're well today.
Thank you.
Tom, I want to talk to you about guns and testosterone. I work as an electrician in the Portland metro area, and as you well know, Portland's sort of a liberal oasis in a very red city. Before I even go into a homeowner's house, just by looking at the sort of iconography, the thin blue line flags on the flagpole or the lock her up bumper stickers or don't tread on me bumper stickers on the car, I can already tell that the home is going to contain a small arsenal next to the breaker box just before I even go in there. And my question is, I see every day the fact that the far right and people who sit around all day watching Fox News arm themselves very, very well. Meanwhile, people who are working class, probably either apolitical or left-leaning, even if they don't even realize it outright, have no guns. And as you and I sort of, well, you and I listen, sort of talk about the possibility of civil war, knowing that the Revolutionary War was won with guns and that the Civil War, the slaves were emancipated ultimately with guns, and that the Civil Rights Movement was sort of at least helped out by the Black Panther Party and the Weathermen Underground, arming themselves. My question to you is, should the left consider arming ourselves as well?
I would say no. I mean, I think that if you, I'm not saying, don't buy a gun if you think that you should have one. But what I am saying is that I don't think that
as a political reaction.
Yeah, the people on the right who are arming themselves are actually expecting a war. And frankly, they're expecting a race war, a war based on racial lines, because it's really easy to see who somebody is, by the color of their skin. It's a lot harder to come up and ask them their politics. But I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that we're going to have that kind of physical violence in this country. And the simple fact is that the more guns, if you have a gun in your house, you just increased by 500% the chance of an accidental death in your home, and particularly if you have children. So I would not recommend that at all, John. I really would. John, thanks a lot for the call. We'll be right back. Every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell a list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com. And you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Let's check in with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. This report brought to you by Goats for the Old Goat and Ellen Ratner's new book, Loving What You Do. On the line with us, the author has sideswiped former Ohio Congressman Bob Ney. Bob, welcome back.
Well, thank you, Tom. Pleasure to be back.
So with regard to the news, what's at the top of your list?
Well, I'm a little sad because this will be the last time we will be seeing Jared Kushner in an interview. I'm assuming.
Why will it be the last time?
Well, he'll never be allowed, I would assume. Somebody's going to go to the president and say, don't ever let him do an interview again. That's what I'm going to assume.
Oh, this is the Axios interview? I did not see that, but I understand that he was pressed rather aggressively.
Well, it's a must-watch. The visuals on it, I have seen, robots that have more lifelike ability than he did. Seriously, you just, it is cold, calculated, almost unmoving in the interview. It was amazing when he talked about the Palestinians, for example, and he didn't care if they liked him. The most stunning to me too on the the interview was aired late Sunday was the fact of when they asked him about the Russians, and he says he doesn't know if he would contact the FBI if contacted again by the Russians seeking a meeting.
Now, I saw that clip on TV this morning. Kushner came across to me as an entitled princeling, as you know, something out of Game of Thrones. You know, as the young man who was raised to be a king and now is.
Right. I mean, he was, like I said, he was beyond robotic, arrogant.
Yeah.
I mean, every type of body feature that you could imagine that you wouldn't want to do in an interview, he did.
Right.
I mean, it stunned me when I watched it. You know, this morning
am the oligarch.
in the news.
Yeah,
it's just stunned me.
So what else is up?
I doubt he will be back on again. He didn't do anybody any favors in the administration, and the Russian talk was absolutely incredible. One would think he would be politically smart enough to at least say, well, yes, if I was contacted, I would talk to the proper authorities and leave it at that, but he didn't.
Right.
An item in the news, Tom, that I think says a lot, and it goes a little bit hand in hand with what's going on in Israel, because the peace process, negotiations, the Trump plan is done. And if you look at what Secretary of State Pompeo said to one of the private functions that he did over the weekend, where he absolutely downplayed the entire thing, even to the point where, you know, he's admitting that it really isn't a starter. And there's a couple of reasons for it. One, the fact that they have not involved Palestinians, although Kushner says he talks to Palestinians. You know, I think in the United States he's talked to supposedly a few of them.
Wait, so he got a couple of Palestinian housekeepers?
Maybe. That's very, doing some service around the house, and he's talked to them. And they won't say who, but they've talked to a couple of people. And he was, during this Axios interview, he was questioned, you know, about people on the negotiating committee, and he didn't care that there weren't any Palestinians on the negotiating committee. So, but that combined with the fact that Israeli politics are a bit upside down now, so, you know, Netanyahu is not out front on two areas. One, the peace plan, and so it's done. And then the second is the Iran situation, because I think in a stunning comment yesterday, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said that the Trump administration is willing to talk to Iran with no preconditions. Now, this is the same group that has sanctioned everything except the air that the Iranians breathe.
Right.
They've sent warships. They've went along with the false claims of the Saudis that the Iranians, you know, did something to their tankers, which, you know, we're supposed to believe the people that chopped up a reporter and then said he left the embassy. And so now, I think a very stunning move, Pompeo says, well, we will talk to them with no preconditions. Not the fact of will the Iranians, you know, cut back on any nuclear production, not human rights, nothing. So the Trump administration has now, Tom, went 180 degrees in the other direction. And if you look at what the president said in Japan, which was a slap right as Bolton, the national security advisor, John Bolton, stood behind him, I think this is a huge signal coming that they are breaking from Bolton, they meaning Trump and Pompeo, absolutely breaking from Bolton on this almost inevitable act of war that Bolton was headed to.
That's interesting.
That's what I think.
Yeah.
That's what I think that
we'll see how long he lasts.
Right. Oh, I think Bolton's going to be now, which is a safe move for the world. I think Bolton will now be
marginalized
on his way out.
Yeah. That'd be a good thing.
You were talking, I was listening, I love listening to your show. You were talking about some health issues out there with the bottled water. We're carrying a story today that the measles cases are the highest since 1992. So as of May 31st, the United States has recorded 981 cases in 26 states this year. And that's the highest number since 1992, when 2,000 some cases were reported for that year. So, you know, we declared in 2000 that measles were eradicated. And that's, you know, years after the 97% effectiveness of the two doses that, you know, were given for measles. So now the CDC is warning Thursday that outbreaks in New York City, Rockland County, New York, have continued for nearly 8 months. And if they continue throughout the summer and the fall, the United States may lose its measles elimination status. So for those who debate, you know, vaccines, et cetera, these are some pretty alarming statistics.
Yeah, no, vaccines work. Bob Ney with Talk Media News. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Tom.
Great talking with you. We'll be back. We're going to talk with former Ambassador William Vanden Heuvel. And this is fascinating. This guy knew FDR. Stick around. We'll be back.
You're listening listening to Thom Hartmann.
We say fight back!
Free Speech TV is in the thick of it right now with their pledge drive, their membership drive, and also, you know, they're rolling out 2 new programs this month. I mean, lots of cool stuff is coming from Free Speech TV. The network is expanding. The network is growing. A lot of you have been, and I really appreciate this, a lot of you have been telling your friends about Free Speech TV, and, you know, the result has been that our base of listeners is growing. We're seeing it substantially in our call volume, and we're seeing it in you know, in other areas, and that's a really good thing. In fact, that's one of the most powerful ways you can contribute to Free Speech TV, in addition to sending money, which is of course really important and needed right now because that's how the network stays alive. But that is telling other people about it, telling them about this show, and you can find it right here and all that kind of stuff. So thank you for that, and keep it up. In the meantime, we've got to raise, you know, a couple $100,000 here over the next week or so, and your help is really, really needed. So with a $20 gift, there's the bumper sticker, our slogan for the show, fair and only slightly unbalanced. With a $72 gift, you get the book, The Hidden History of Guns, my new book. In fact, it's out this week. Tomorrow is the official publication date. And with the $120 gift, you get an autographed copy of my book, The Hidden History of Guns. With a $20 monthly gift, a pledge of $20 a month, in other words, becoming a supporting or sustaining member, and this is important because this helps Free Speech TV budget. This, you know, if they can look at a spreadsheet and say, okay, we've got this many people who are pledging $10 a month, 20, 30, 50, whatever it may be, over this period of time, then we know where our budget points are going to be at each point. And in fact, if we can get enough people doing this, you know, we can dial back these fundraising drives rather substantially. So that's a $20 a month gift. You get the stainless steel water bottle with the Thom Hartmann program logo on it. With $30 a month, you get the Thom Hartmann Program tote bag and the stainless steel water bottle that says "Democracy begins with you." With a $500 gift, there is a virtual meet and greet. We're going to do an invitation-only meet and greet, get together, where you know, you'll see me on your computer screen, and you'll be able to talk to me and ask me questions and things like that. I don't think that I'll see you, but I'll hear you, and you know, we'll have a conversation. That's with a $500 gift. Not just you, but it'll be a whole bunch of us getting together at the same time, but only people who have made these $500 gifts. Also with a $500 gift, if you are in the Washington, D.C. area or want to come there, next Monday, June 10th, yeah, that would be next Monday, I will be in Washington, D.C. at Busboys and Poets at, as I recall, was it 6:30? I don't have my one sheet, but I'm pretty sure it's 6:30. So the hour before that, which would be 5:30, we're going to have an invitation-only private little meet and greet there in Washington, D.C. So, you know, please check it out, and that's with a $500 gift. That's something that you can do. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Washington, or come to Portland, Oregon, rather, and hang out with us in the studio here and get to see the magic of television in this digital age where where, it's pretty amazing. Nate is sitting over there with the entire video suite. It's being run by one guy. And it's stuff that 10 years ago would have taken, 6 people and a multi-million-dollar set of equipment. And the technology has advanced so rapidly, as has Nate's skill set, that one guy can just run the whole video of this show. Sean is over here running all the audio and booking our guests and keeping me going and wide awake and whatnot. Depending on the day of the week, either Joyce or Nick will be here. They answer our phones and fill in on the boards. Typically, Joyce is in the first half of the week and Nick in the second half. Sometimes Louise drops by, but I'll certainly be here, and we'll be here, the last hour of the program, and then we'll walk to a restaurant nearby and have some lunch. So, I have a lot of fun with these, and I think that the people who come really enjoy them. A number of people have come more than once, which is kind of cool. So those are the what would you call them, gift levels or premium levels? I think premium is the word generally used in the nonprofit world. But the real bottom line is, if you want genuine progressive programming, real progressive programming, not some progressive programming owned by Comcast, or faux progressive programming, frankly, this is where you find it, right here on Free Speech TV. And to the best of my knowledge, pretty much not anywhere else. All these different programs, progressive perspective, that you can get on TV. So call now, 877-378-8669. Thank you. Every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell a list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com, and you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Moscow property. It's the Mueller report.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. We have been covering a lot of territory here. Ambassador Van Hoovel is going to be with us in a moment, as soon as he gets his phone working, so that we can hear his audio. We can see his picture right now, but we won't be able to hear his audio. And we were talking about, we've talked about a whole bunch of things. The fate and future of democracy, of various political parties in the United States, and we've been talking about guns and the possibility that we could, be standing right now on a point where, the nature of guns and gun control and all that sort of stuff in the United States could be very much at play. And I'm proposing, among other things, some very simple and straightforward things with regard to guns. One of them is, why don't we just say, just like with a car back in the 1920s, you could buy a car and you could drive it, outside of 2 states. You could drive it anywhere else in the United States without a driver's license in 1920. And, what we figured out from that was that people were dying. It was like, cars were going too fast. They were running people off the road. They were killing people, things like that. And so, in order to solve that problem, we came up with this 3-step solution. Part 1 is the car has to be registered, and throughout its life, from the time it's built until the time it's destroyed, and that registration has to be registered with the state, and the state needs to periodically, every year you have to renew your registration, right? Or your car's not legal. Number one. We should do the same with guns. Number two, if you're going to drive a car, again, something that can kill people, 6,000 pounds of steel flying down the highway at 65 miles an hour, if you're going to drive a car, you have to prove that you know how to do it, that you are competent to drive, and that you are competent, that you understand the laws of the road, and that you understand how to drive. And, without that, what do you have? You've got this bunch of people driving around who don't know what they're doing and don't know how to do it. So anyhow, actually, and then number three, I was talking about the liability insurance, and in fact, Tim in Beaverton, Oregon, wants to address that. Tim, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, it's pretty simple based on what's transpired, at least in the last decade. But it's very simple. What the Republicans want to convey is every time one of these mass shootings happens, is your thoughts and prayers. That's basically all they say. If you look at Fox News, the Republican hierarchy of the NRA, what they're doing behind closed doors, they're popping the champagne corks, because what these killings do is shore up their white nationalist Second Amendment base. It's very simple.
Yeah, I think you're right, Tim, and I think it's a real tragedy. The ambassador's with us. Thank you for the call, Tim. The ambassador's now with us, which is just super. Ambassador William J. Vandenheuvel, Hope and History is his new book, a memoir of tumultuous times. Ambassador, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Tom, very much. Glad to be here.
Thanks so much for being with us. And you have led an extraordinary life from your birth in 1930 up to today. I noticed in your first chapter is titled "Growing Up in the Age of Roosevelt," and you have some just extraordinary stories there. But in your seventh chapter, you talk also about running for Congress in 1960 and Eleanor Roosevelt endorsing you. You worked with Bobby Kennedy. I mean, you have seen the arc of history in this country in a way that most of us have not. And I'm wondering what lessons you learned from the Great Depression, from Franklin Roosevelt's work, and all the stuff that has intervened to this day about today's politics, looking back.
Well, Tom, I grew up in Rochester, New York, from an immigrant family. My mother and father had both emigrated to the United States, and we barely spoke English at home. But it was a time, although the Depression was well underway, the arrival of President Roosevelt in the White House made the difference. To have a president who spoke to the concerns of the people directly, who was not afraid. I mean, the phrase that we often cite with Roosevelt, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself," really had meaning to people who were fearful for their jobs, fearful for their homes. Almost everything was challenged because the Depression was so severe. But it was the Democratic Revolution that Roosevelt led that made the difference in America. And when we talk about the greatness of America, we should measure it really in the last 75 years, when the liberal government that he established addressed itself to the needs of the people for the first time, really, in a very direct way. And so in our home, as in all the homes in Rochester, working-class families, Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt were true heroes.
Yeah. And Roosevelt established a new direction for the Democratic Party in 1933. And, although Democrats had been, at least opposed to Harding and Coolidge and whatnot, through that era, and Hoover, ultimately. But it seems that the Democratic Party has disengaged in many regards from Roosevelt's visions. I mean, his suggestion for a second Bill of Rights that would guarantee as a right health care, for example, and a job and education. Lyndon Johnson kind of brought some of that stuff to the fore with the Great Society. Go ahead.
Lyndon Johnson did a great job in continuing the New Deal. But the President Roosevelt, in 1944, in his last State of the Union address, outlined the second Bill of Rights that included health care, that included a decent home, included a decent job. Now, you don't get these things by just pushing a button. You get these things by making it the focus of your party and of your own individual leadership. And this was the world that Roosevelt said we had to create to justify the terrible cruelty and losses of the Second World War. And that's when he enunciated the Four Freedoms as well. In January of 1941, before the United States was in the war, Roosevelt went to the nation and said, these are times that probably will involve us in this terrible war. But the only thing that can justify the losses of our children and the losses of the treasure of our nations is that we're going to create a different world.
Yeah.
And the world he set out to create was a world based on the Four Freedoms, a world that was based on cooperation, working together with nations, and offering freedom and justice to everyone.
Your daughter, Katrina Vanden Heuvel, published the Nation magazine and has been a real champion for progressive causes all these years. And it seems that, you know, Jimmy Carter was the first Democratic president after the Great Society, and you know, was trying to reprise parts of it. But ever since then, it seems like much of the Democratic Party has kind of lost its way, and we've seen this bifurcation that was, you know, super on display in the 2016 election and the Hillary versus Bernie stuff. Where do you see the Democratic Party going? I mean, you've known so many from Eleanor Roosevelt through Bobby Kennedy you worked with. You have been so inside and so known these people. Where do we go with this?
I think you have to have a president or a presidential candidate before you can truly focus where the party is and what it's saying. It makes all the difference in the world. And if you have a conservative Democrat, then you have that going in that direction. Roosevelt was a great, sincere, progressive, liberal president. And Mrs. Roosevelt herself was the nation's leader. But I think that today you're going to find a definition of who we are by who emerges as our leaders in the primary elections that are to come. I mean, Nancy Pelosi is certainly a liberal leader.
Yes.
And I think that the judge for the many, she's an extraordinarily effective leader in the House of Representatives. But we're going to have to live through the next year to see the 23 candidates in action. And a lot's going to happen that we can predict. But good and bad things are going to happen. So that by the time we get to the fight where we have a candidate against Trump, we're going to have learned a lot.
We're talking to Ambassador William J. Vanden Heuvel, his new book, Hope and History, a memoir of tumultuous times, which is just an extraordinary look into this arc of history of the United States.
You know, you made reference, Tom, to Carter's presidency.
Yes.
And then the decline of progressive government. That one of the problems was that Lyndon Johnson left us not only with extraordinary accomplishments in the fields of so many human needs, but he left us with Vietnam.
Yes.
And Vietnam, I think, took a great deal of the energy and direction out of the Democratic Party.
To what extent do you think that the assassination of Bobby Kennedy did the same thing?
Oh, terrible. You know, what America went through in those 5 years in the 60s, first starting with the assassination of President Kennedy, itself one of the most profound traumatic shocks that America had ever experienced. And then the murder of Martin Luther King, and then the assassination of Robert Kennedy. It was as though you wiped out the leadership, the generation of leadership. Robert Kennedy would have made a great president. He was tough, he was smart, he was resilient, he was compassionate, he had a sense of the needs of our people's nation. He had a sense of the terrible aspect of racial dimensions in American life. And I think he would have done so much in many ways to bring the country together, to unite it, and to give it purpose.
Ambassador Vanden Heuvel, we have just a minute until we're going to hit a hard break here and have to wrap this up. I'm wondering, what is the main message that you would like to convey to people with your new book, Hope and History?
I think we have to understand we live in a totally different age, and one of the great enemies of democracy is war. We have to stop endless wars in this world where we're involved, and whether we're involved or not. And then we have to confront our racial dilemma that's been part of the 300 years of American history on this continent, and understand that what we have to do to try to bring true opportunity and decency for the lives of all Americans. And I think perhaps more than anything, we need to put in the White House a president who speaks the truth. The great enemy of democracy is falsehood. And unless the president himself is committed to truth, then I think the nation's democratic values are in jeopardy.
What an extraordinary summary. I completely agree on every point, and it's so very, very well said. The book is Hope and History, a memoir of tumultuous times by former Ambassador William J. Vandenheuvel, the foreword by Douglas Brinkley. Sir, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Tom.
And thank you for writing this brilliant memoir. It's absolutely extraordinary. I highly recommend it. We'll be back. It's 18 minutes past the hour.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this. And welcome back, May in Annandale, Virginia. Hey, May, what's on your mind today?
Hi. I appreciate you guys being there for us today.
Thank you.
This thing, capitalism, I think there's so much that you guys have talked about. My head is reeling. The thing where you hit on this with the going after the Russian spy, I found that fascinating, a fascinating idea. Obviously, we're in an era where good is having to stand up for itself. And there's always the devil's advocate at the door. But I think as a nation, this thing where we are consistently being divided, and I can see this administration catering to supremacists because the closed-minded setting, that grabbing onto and hearing a narrative that they want to hear in the first place. But these forms of control, when you look at it historically, they go back. They go back even before us. They go back to even the Plantagenets. And I think what the public needs to start looking at to understand, because I heard a young man say something, and he was disparaging the Constitution, and I don't think people understand exactly what it is for and how it is meant to play into us as a nation and for our protection. And, the nobles and the hierarchy, the royals, were always using the lower echelon to serve their purposes, to use their lies to serve their purposes. And I think what we're having now, especially, I don't know if you want to call it a corporate coup, a regime change, whatever, that it's this sleight of hand that's consistent, especially through media. And, you touched a big one right there with media, because it's also on social media that we have to be careful of, because these newer kids, those of us that are older, like 50, 60 and up, we have that frame of reference to fall back on, but they don't. And to me, I've always looked at it, and I explained it to somebody that was older than myself, who basically right now is a Republican. And I mentioned to them that, they grew up with the New Deal. They grew up in an era where things were functioning how they were supposed to. I believe in what's called a practical capitalism, where it's capitalism and it's married with social programs, because as the Constitution says, that we are equal and we have the right to pursue happiness. Well, when I look at that, the pursuit of happiness to me is the right to prosperity, that we all have the right to these opportunities to prosper. And when you have a certain group that is keeping the other down so that they can reap the most of those rewards, of course, they're shortening those on the bottom, and they start using them, which is what it goes back historically. This is what the Constitution is for, was for us to get away from that system when everyone came up.
Tragically, though, it's been badly twisted by the Supreme Court. I mean, the Buckley decision in '76 and Citizens United, it's It's
Oh,
it's air.
yes, the Citizens United was awful. It was horrid.
I mean, and and that's just the beginning. I mean, the Heller decision twisting the Second Amendment. There's been case after case after case made, and we need to address these things. May, I got to run, but thank you for the call. Your points were very well made. It's 22 minutes past the hour. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, the place where smart people get their news. We'll be right back. Every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell the list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com. And you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Thom Hartmann. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Boy, we've covered so much territory. By the way, this our interview with William Vanden Heuvel, this really is a remarkable book. I have only read pieces of it, but the stuff that I have read just is remarkable. And wow, he is 89 years old, more or less. It's and this week there's something about that generation. It's got to be, because he's just 89 years old. He's just as sharp as a tack. Yesterday, Louise and I had lunch with our three kids and Louise's mother, my mother-in-law, who just turned 89 last week. Her birthday is the same as Jack Kennedy's, and it was a birthday party for her. And what did she do to celebrate her birthday? Well, last week she got out a sander, one of these big, two-handed electric sanders, and sanded the door to her bedroom. And she, a couple of years ago, Louise was talking to her. She was like, what are you doing? Well, I'm painting my house. You're painting your house, Mom? You're 85 years old? Oh, don't worry, I know how to use ladders. But you can't, no, I'm just doing one side a week. Don't worry about it. The outside, there's just some remarkable people who are in their 80s and 90s and just continuing on. Just keeping on and doing great work and holding it all together. And you just, wonder what. Louise has told me so many times stories of growing up where her parents were like, no, we're not going to McDonald's. No, you may not drink soft drinks. It's going to be fresh food. It's going to be fresh out of the garden. It's going to be, it's going to be healthy food. They weren't like vegans or anything like that, but it was just, they were seriously into high quality nutrition and raising their kids that way. And I think Louise is going to live into her 90s or later, who knows. But Ambassador Vanden Heuvel is extraordinary. Meanwhile, Bernie has this op-ed out, and I'm going to be picking up your phone calls right after the break. I just have about a half a minute here before we have to wrap it up. But Bernie's op-ed is, pretty remarkable, where he talks about, what is going on in the United States and how badly we have gone down. He says the top 10 drug companies repeatedly investigated for price fixing and other potentially illegal actions made nearly $70 billion in profits last year, even as Americans paid the most per capita among developed nations for their prescription medicine. Top executives in the fossil fuel industry spent hundreds of millions on campaign contributions to elect candidates while denying the reality of climate change. Major corporations don't pay federal taxes because of a rigged system. And then he quotes FDR. And, wages in the United States have been stagnant for over 40 years. Today, the wealthiest 3 families in the country own more wealth than the bottom half of the American people, and the top 1% owns more wealth than the bottom 90%. remarkable. Check it out. Bernie's piece is in the New York Times today. We'll be back with your calls right after this.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with your calls in the Thom Hartmann Program, where we speak the truths the multinational corporations would really rather you didn't know all about. Free Speech TV is in the thick of it right now with their pledge drive, their membership drive, and also, they're rolling out 2 new programs this month. I mean, lots of cool stuff is coming from Free Speech TV. The network is expanding. The network is growing. A lot of you have been, and I really appreciate this, a lot of you have been telling your friends about Free Speech TV, and, the result has been that our base of listeners is growing. We're seeing it substantially in our call volume, and we're seeing it in in other areas, and that's a really good thing. In fact, that's one of the most powerful ways you can contribute to Free Speech TV, in addition to sending money, which is of course really important and needed right now because that's how the network stays alive. But that is telling other people about it. Telling them about this show, and you can find it right here and all that kind of stuff. So thank you for that, and keep it up. In the meantime, we've got to raise, a couple $100,000 here over the next week or so, and your help is really, really needed. So with a $20 gift, there's the bumper sticker, our slogan for the show, fair and only slightly unbalanced. With a $72 gift, you get the book, The Hidden History of Guns, my new book. In fact, it's out this week. Tomorrow is the official publication date. And with the $120 gift, you get an autographed copy of my book, The Hidden History of Guns. With a $20 monthly gift, a pledge of $20 a month, in other words, becoming a supporting or sustaining member, and this is important because this helps Free Speech TV budget. This, if they can look at a spreadsheet and say, okay, we've got this many people who are pledging $10 a month, 20, 30, 50, whatever it may be, over this period of time, then we know where our budget points are going to be at each point. And in fact, if we can get enough people doing this, we can dial back these fundraising drives rather substantially. So that's a $20 a month gift. You get the stainless steel water bottle with the Thom Hartmann program logo on it. With $30 a month, you get the Thom Hartmann Program tote bag and the stainless steel water bottle that says "Democracy begins with you." With a $500 gift, there is a virtual meet and greet. We're going to do an invitation-only meet and greet, get together, where you'll see me on your computer screen, and you'll be able to talk to me and ask me questions and things like that. I don't think that I'll see you, but I'll hear you, and we'll have a conversation. That's with a $500 gift. Not just you, but it'll be a whole bunch of us getting together at the same time, but only people who have made these $500 gifts. Also with a $500 gift, if you are in the Washington, D.C. area or want to come there, next Monday, June 10th, that would be next Monday, I will be in Washington, D.C. at Busboys and Poets at, as I recall, was it 6:30? I don't have my one sheet, but I'm pretty sure it's 6:30. So the hour before that, which would be 5:30, we're going to have an invitation-only private little meet and greet there in Washington, D.C. So, please check it out, and that's with a $500 gift. That's something that you can do. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Portland, Oregon, rather, and hang out with us in the studio here and get to see the magic of television in this digital age where it's pretty amazing. Nate is sitting over there with the entire video suite. It's being run by one guy, and it's stuff that 10 years ago would have taken 6 people and a multi-million-dollar set of equipment, and the technology has advanced so rapidly, as has Nate's skill set. That one guy can just run the whole video of this show. Sean is over here running all the audio and booking our guests and keeping me going and wide awake and whatnot. Depending on the day of the week, either Joyce or Nick will be here. They answer our phones and fill in on the boards. Typically Joyce is in the first half of the week and Nick in the second half. Sometimes Louise drops by, but I'll certainly be here, and we'll be here, the last hour of the program, and then we'll walk to a restaurant nearby and have some lunch. So, I have a lot of fun with these, and I think that the people who come really enjoy them. A number of people have come more than once, which is kind of cool. So those are the what would you call them, gift levels or premium levels? I think premium is the word generally used in the nonprofit world. But the real bottom line is, if you want genuine progressive programming, real progressive programming, not some progressive programming owned by Comcast, or faux progressive programming, frankly, this is where you find it, right here on Free Speech TV. And to the best of my knowledge, pretty much not anywhere else. All these different programs, progressive perspective, that you can get on TV. So call now, 877-378-8669. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
I may be coming to your city soon on our book tour for The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment. I'll be in New York, Washington, D.C., Portland, Los Angeles, Seattle, San Francisco, Chicago, and Minneapolis. Here I come. More information is available at thomhartmann.com. And this hour of the program brought to you by X-Chair. XChairTom.com is their website. And welcome back to the program. The USS John McCain baseball cap is selling like hotcakes. There's a tweet about this thing. The guy who runs the website, ustroopgear.com, he says, throughout my years, the website has sold 4 to 8 of these caps per year. Last night, I received orders for over 75 caps. Needless to say, I've filled all orders in the order that they were received and put additional items on rush status today, and he's ordering more product. I'm guessing, this is U.S. troop gear. These are products designed to go to American troops. So that's fascinating. And Sky News, this is particularly interesting. Sky News tracked down they were doing kind of man in the street interviews about Donald Trump and his coming to the UK. And let me see, what did I do with that? Here it is, right here. And just listen to this interview. It's about a minute, and then I'm going to pick up your phone calls. But this is just, a young man with his wife or girlfriend on the street, and a Sky News reporter walks up and says, should Brits respect Donald Trump? And here's what he has to say.
Respect is a funny one, isn't it? Respect. I mean, why should we show respect to a man who speaks of grabbing women by their genitals? Why should we show that sort of respect, if you like, to a man who called for a ban on all Muslims entering the United States? Why should we show respect to a man who separated children from their parents at the border? Why should we respect a man who is fueling a climate emergency which throws an existential threat to humanity? Why should we respect a man who insults in the most juvenile, pathetic way, in a way which would embarrass my seven-year-old nephew, the mayor of London? Why should we respect a man who frankly represents, not the real America that millions of people fought for, women who fought for their rights, LGBTQ people, the civil rights movement, but America of the elites, if you like, of bigotry. And that point, by the way, about a US trade deal.
I'm going to stop it right there. But it's this. I shared with you earlier in the program Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London's, op-ed in today's Guardian, or yesterday's Guardian, basically saying, basically saying everything that young man just said, and enough already, is what he's saying. Cat Stone in Coos Bay, Oregon. Hey, Cat Stone, what's up?
Well, a lot of things are up, but mostly things are down. I'm calling about something I've been thinking about for a long time. You know, I used to teach nonviolence education for women who had been in domestic violence situations. And the conclusion I came to was that we put ourselves in situations because we think we don't deserve something better, and that we also start to attack other people for what they believe because we're not confident about ourselves. And the solution to this is to teach all of our children, I think that's where we have to start, that to have good self-esteem, to like themselves, to love themselves.
Yeah, you're talking about parenting. Are you responding to my riff about guns, about how when a man handles a gun, his testosterone levels go up and his aggression increases?
Yes, and I think about that a lot because I think about what I talk about with the women in my classes is that our culture has said to men, you have this role. You get to control things, and you not only get to, you must. Right. And you must control your wife. I had a woman in my group who would say that her father-in-law would tell her husband every single day, you must control your wife.
Oh, my.
And this is an impossible task. And I don't think they want to do it, but they think they have to. And if they don't get obeyed, then they get violent. And the solution, these days is to shoot somebody who disagrees with you instead of, and if I feel good about myself, I can listen to somebody else's point of view, and I can even change my mind.
No, I completely get what you're saying, Catstone, and I agree with you, and thank you for pointing it out. I would add, though, that having a gun available allows a bad feeling to turn into an impulsive behavior like that. And so it's not enough to just, give people self-esteem. Obviously, we need to do that. But we also need to reduce the level of guns in our country if we're going to do anything about gun violence. Nick in Cliffside Park, New Jersey. Hey, Nick, you wanted to talk about impeachment?
Thank you, John. I know that you're a little bit, understandably, perhaps burnt out with the subject of impeachment. But what I want to say is something that
I'm not at all.
to me. I've never read this anywhere else. I've never heard anybody else talk about this approach. And in a nutshell, what it is when we consider that 1/3 of the government, right, is the legislative branch federally, and the Congress, the House, is half of that 1/3, where the Congress, the Democratic Congress, right now has absolute power. We have the power to initiate an impeachment inquiry, an investigation, and have it run right through, if necessary, the November election, but the day before the election. Now, the idea is very simple, to have a unified committee that incorporates all the investigations under a central committee, and will do this every single day right up through the election and build up a record and a case for for literally impeaching in the original sense of the word.
So are you suggesting that, judiciary, the chair of the Judiciary Committee is Jerry Nadler. That's where impeachment has to originate. Oversight and Reform, Elijah Cummings, they're investigating Trump. Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff, they're investigating Trump in about a dozen different ways. Ways and Means, Richard Neal, they're the ones who are supposed to, by law, get Trump's tax returns. They're investigating Trump. Frank Pallone is the chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee. They're looking into Trump. Foreign Affairs, Elliot Engel is the chairman there. They're looking into Trump. Maxine Waters, the chairwoman of the Financial Services Committee, is investigating Trump. Homeland Security, Benny Thompson is investigating Trump. Natural Resources, Raul Grijalva is investigating Trump. And I can give you the details of any of these investigations. I've got the whole list here. Veterans Affairs, Mark Takano of California is investigating Trump. Education and Labor, Bobby Scott is investigating Trump. Peter DeFazio on Transportation and Infrastructure, they're looking into the old Trump post office, or the Trump Hotel. It used to be the old post office building, among other things. And Appropriations, Nita Lowey is looking into Trump. If we just took the chairs of all those committees, you've got a committee. Is that what you're saying?
Something like that. We had the select committee in Watergate. Remember how that worked?
Yes.
It was a select, specially appointed committee. Pelosi has the power to do this, and we can do Barr at the same time. It's not either or; it's both and. And the way this should be done is that there is a coordinated public relations campaign every day at the end of the hearings at 7:30 or 8:30, whatever. Somebody will come out, maybe Pelosi or whoever, and give a 15 to 20-minute summary of the day's activities. And we need a war room, a Democratic
I think it needs to be a
war
3
room,
to 5
which
minute
will address
summary.
every Trump tweet in real time, and anything that Sanders says, or any of his representatives say, addressed in real time. This is a war for the hearts and minds of the American people, and we have to go way beyond the Mueller report. Mueller himself has to be subpoenaed and questioned for 1 or 2 or even 3 weeks, if necessary, to get everything in that report submitted without the redactions.
No, I totally get it, Nick, and I completely agree with you. Thank you for the call. Well said. Tony in Huntsville, Alabama. Hey, Tony, what's on your mind?
Tom, hey, I'm loving the show, man. My mother is like your mother-in-law. She was on the roof nailing shingles the other day.
Wow. Yeah, there you go.
And she's 87.
Yeah, that's the greatest generation. I mean, they just totally kick ass.
These Alabama old ladies. Listen, this thing about the guns, man, this is totally a topic you could do a whole show on. I mean, listen, I hear these guys say, I feared for my life, but they are really on ego dopamine. I mean, if that's a study, that's one heck of a defense for all these unarmed black men that are getting shot by weak guys with guns who want to prove themselves. I never had a problem with a police officer one-on-one. But if you get 4 or 5 cops pull over one black man, they're all doped up. They got something to prove. And it always happens mainly in a group.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know what we can do about it.
That's true of people after football games. That's true of people, the whole soccer problem with violence with soccer. They've also found that when people watch sports, that when men watch sports, if their team wins, their testosterone level goes up. If their team loses, their testosterone level goes down. Both of those things can cause violence. So, yeah, Tony, I get it. I get it. So what's your solution in your mind?
My solution is if an unarmed cop jumps out and shoots a kid in 2 seconds, he's got to pay for that funeral. If you shoot an unarmed man, you pay for his funeral.
Oh, at the very least.
You can't shoot an unarmed man and then burden his family, dust your hands off, and walk away.
Yeah.
If you shoot an unarmed man and that man dies, you are responsible for taking care of all of his arrangements and compensating his family. Because here's the thing, Tom. When you hold a gun, you have a responsibility. And I remember my uncle took a beating one time with a gun on him. And he said, I could have shot him, but I'm not going to shoot a man for losing a fight and standing up for himself. I lost the fight, but it's not worth killing somebody because I lost the fight.
Wow.
And that's what they used to say.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is the direction that we need to go with policing, is a more European direction. But why stop at just pay for the funeral? I mean, first of all, police officers have the power of the state behind them, which is bigger than an insurance policy. And so why not say that they're going to have to support the family of that person for the rest of their lives?
Exactly. Don't kill somebody's kid for playing with a gun in the park or for somebody for selling cigarettes and then walk away. You're responsible for putting that man in the do taking care of his family because you took that man away.
Yeah.
Great show, Tom. Do more.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Tony. Thanks for the call. And thanks for listening to us down there in Huntsville, Alabama. It is 45 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls, continuing our conversation right after this. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's amazing when you look at all these Trump investigations. It's like every major committee in the House of Representatives is investigating some part of the Trump crime family, basically. Hey, the entire Trump crime family is out of the country. Is it time for a celebration? I mean, he took all his kids with him. He took their spouses. He took their children. It's like 1,000 people. How do we close the borders? Right? The problem is Pence, right? Oh, well. Tony in Shirley, New York. Hey, Tony, what's on your mind today? Thanks for watching Free Speech.
Hey, thank you very much, Tom. Pleasure to speak with you. I was curious as to there's a big thing. I'm not seeing very many people follow the Huawei issue within the United States and how the Trump administration has banned all purchases regarding any 5G networks without any evidence whatsoever as to what, in fact, they're claiming that they're doing. But I do see something significant. I do see the T-Mobile and Sprint merger and the assurances that they're going to expand 5G networks. The fact that T-Mobile is expending a lot of money staying in the Trump Hotel in Washington, D.C. Ajay Pai just recently okayed this $26 billion merger. I'm curious as to whether or not, in your opinion, you feel as if this is a co-opted, basically a coordinated measure by the Trump administration to try to have this measure go through and to basically place China as the quote-unquote boogeyman in this situation in order to have this pump through.
Yeah. There actually is evidence that Huawei's telephones and that their telecom equipment can feed data back to the Chinese government. Huawei was started in part by the Chinese government. It is the largest, or maybe the second largest provider of telecommunications equipment in the world now because of subsidies and tariffs, maintained and sustained by the Chinese government. The only other company in the world that makes this kind of stuff is Ericsson out of one of the Scandinavian countries, I think maybe Denmark. And frankly, I would like to see the United States get back into the telecom business. I'd like to see, Cisco making these things or some American company and making them here in the United States. I am concerned about Huawei. With regard to the merger, that goes back to, the Supreme Court adopting in 1973, I think it was, or maybe 76, adopting Robert Bork's theory that don't worry about corporate mergers unless it's going to increase prices to the consumer. Which is a BS argument against anti-monopoly laws. You were going to say, Tony?
Well, that's a step around from antitrust regulations, the Borg, that Borg amendment. It's a total step around from the antitrust measures that we know that are in effect. But that being said, Huawei, 50% of their market is outside of China. Right. The majority of their sales basically are in the UK, in Canada, and quite frankly, none of the Canadians, none of them seem to be none of them seem to be expressing these concerns. But at the same token, we all realized through Edward Snowden that our own government was spying on us and taking our data and our telephone information.
Right, so just imagine what the Chinese government is doing. You've got an authoritarian regime there that's right up front about the fact that they're spying on everybody all the time, and if you get out of line, they'll kill you.
I don't see how they would have a reach over here into a separate state if they felt that they were... Okay,
so they come in through your phone system. Your phone's on your local Wi-Fi system. On your local Wi-Fi system is your thermostat and your Alexa microphone and the microphone in your phone and the camera in your phone. I see a lot of potential for damage there. Tony, thank you for the call. We'll have to agree to disagree, I guess. We'll be right back. Stick around. Every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell a list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com. And you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Josh in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Hey, Josh, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Really good show today. Great interviews. I'm also pitching in to support Free Speech TV. As you mentioned, I live in Virginia Beach. The recent senseless act of violence happened here, less than about 3 miles from my
yeah, that was
house,
the worst mass shooting of this year so far.
And so, especially lately, the idea of guns and gun control has, been weighing on my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I was struck when your previous caller, I believe it was John from Portland, raised the suggestion of whether the left should take up arms as a response, political response to, an extreme right wing. And I get that concern that, John has of being a liberal surrounded by the extreme conservatives in his state. And, I think we're all surrounded as progressives surrounded by the establishment, funded by corporations and whatnot. And I'd like to pose an alternative response, political response to that, and I think it'll be more effective. And I think it's really the ultimate way forward, way to win. And I know there's a lot of ideas about we need gun control, we need money out of politics, we need police reform, we need to get control of the Senate.
Yeah, no, I get all that. Josh, can you cut to the chase?
Yes, we need to talk about how to win, and that is we've got to focus on running for office as progressives. That's local, then state, and federal. And
right.
If we can talk a bit more, less about maybe talk a bit more about the local politics, then maybe more of us will run and more of us will win. I think we do a lot of talking about the issues, and that's wonderful. And I think a lot of us are very good on the issues, but I think what we're not as good about is talking about running for office. No,
I'm totally with you, John, and I think it's really, and thank you for the call, I think it's really important that people do run for office, and a great place to start, by the way, is the school board. I mean, that's literally where Phyllis Schlafly started. Well, she didn't end up in high elected office, but there's, a lot. Actually, you'd probably be surprised by the number of politicians who started out running for the local school board. Local politics is great stuff. Mike in Suffolk, Virginia. Hey, Mike, what's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing, Tom?
Good. Two Virginia callers back to back.
Yeah, I'm actually about 15 miles to the west of Virginia Beach.
Uh-huh.
So you brought up the guns scenario. So this is the first time I ever watched the show, so they kind of give you an idea. And you seem like the type of person that obviously has good civil dialogue with people and be able to disagree. What is your overall, I guess, your way of solving, you think, the gun violence over this? What is your opinion?
We had, we had 34,000 gun deaths in the United States in 2016. We had 40,000 last year. About half of those are suicides. About 10% of those are accidents in the home, particularly over 100 of the child deaths last year, where people just had guns laying around. I'm in favor of responsible gun ownership, and that's why I said earlier, and I'm guessing this is what you're responding to, Mike, that when cars started killing people in the 1920s because there were so many of them and they could go so fast, we said, wait a minute, we need to regulate cars. We need to do so, and regulated, by the way, is a word that appears in the Constitution only once, to the best of my knowledge, maybe twice, but in the Second Amendment. We need to regulate cars. We have registration from the time of manufacture till the time of destruction, and every year that registration has to be renewed so we know who's responsible for the car, who owns it, number one. Number two, you have to take a driver's license test. You have to prove you know how to drive, and you have to prove that you know what the laws and rules are associated with driving, so you have to get a driver's license. And number three, you have to have liability insurance, which is the Republican free market solution, right? So if somebody's a lousy driver, their insurance price goes up, sometimes to the point where they can't afford the car anymore. And I would say, why not apply those same three things to guns? It's very simple. It's very straightforward. It is not a violation of Heller. It is not a violation of anybody's constitutional rights. And it just seems like common sense stuff.
Right. I can see that. And I see that point. The downfall with that is, what is the real numbers of people that are gun owners that have these accidents? What are the real numbers that they were actually responsible? Because
if you have a gun in your home, the odds of a person being killed by a gun in your home are 500% higher than if you don't have a gun in your home. That's you know.
I've heard that statistic.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, you can find it. Mike, I'm sorry we're out of time here. It's the end of the show, but
Yeah,
call back again and we'll continue the conversation. Thanks so much for being with us today. What a fascinating day. Tomorrow, I'm sure will be the same. We'll see if Trump sees the Trump blimp. Oh my. And hey, the whole Trump crime family is out of the country right now, right? He took his kids, he took their kids, he took their spouses, he took their servants. Like 1,000 people, that Trump brought with him to the UK. Can we close the border? Don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. Get out there, get active, tag, you're it. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
We say fight